Australia was never about celebrating American excellence and capitalism and building empires and whatever. It was freedom through simplicity. It was liberation through an unburdened life. It will belong to those who can articulate a creed called Australian values and open them to anyone willing to live by them. If you did this in the private sector, you'd go to jail. Nostalgia cannot save a nation. Principles, however, can. The normal average Aussie, 95% of the population, it's not left versus right for them. It's us versus them.
They are demonising all the values that made Australia great in the first place.
Politics is downstream from culture.
Many of you have actually been emailing me and saying, Joel, you've got to read this book. What happened to the lucky country?
I am a free speech zealot. You can say whatever you like, and I will defend to the death your right to say it. You cannot build a broad conservative movement while telling half the nation it doesn't belong. My family's been here for 80 years and 5 generations. At what point do we count as Australian?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the ARC podcast, episode 69. And today we're going to be talking with someone that I thought you'd like that.
Fitting,
yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. I thought you'd like that. A real reaction. All right.
That's fitting.
All right. Now today is going to be especially.
Start again?
It's going to be no, not at all. Yeah, you're going to. The audience will know this is going to be a good episode.
Oh Jesus!
Because the chemistry. And so when it comes to this episode, guys, I've got a very special guest. I've been meaning to interview this bloke for literally 7 years. I first met him in 2019, and ever since, I'm pleased to say he's become a great friend. To me, he doesn't like me saying it, but he's become a bit of a mentor and understanding the Australian political scene. But the reason he's here today is not because basically we're just going to have a conversation. I want to hear about his book. I want to pick his brain about it. Many of you have actually been emailing me and saying, Joel, you've got to read this book. What happened to the lucky country? And this is probably one of the most comprehensive books I've found and I've read that was, one, not only easy to read, but two, actually made sense. And it goes through what's been going in Australia. It goes through what's exactly been happening with regards to the Australian psyche, psychology, politics, and tying it all together. And Damien is a very established publisher. For a number of years, he actually ran Penthouse magazine in Australia. He's someone that has helped pioneer tours in this country. He's brought out the likes of Nigel Farage and Milo Yiannopoulos. And we're going to get into that, which is quite the story, getting into it. But without further ado, Damien, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thanks, man. Pleasure to be here.
Mate, I've been looking forward to this so much, as you know. And the reason why it is I can't tell you in the audience how many conversations we've had, both in person during the COVID years, but also just offline, just talking about what's happening in Australian society. And we can speak freely here. Most people have no idea what they're talking about in politics. And after having a conversation with Damien, I often find myself wondering, why do I bother with a lot of people in the political sphere? Because they're grasping at straws. And what I really liked about this particular book, I was reading it on a second time, actually, on the way to America late last year, is it was an easy read, and it actually helped me better understand my place in the political environment in Australia, what's been going wrong. You've not only diagnosed the issue, but you've also offered some potential ways forward, but you didn't overstep. You've sort of thrown it out there for a discussion to commence. Mark Latham wrote the foreword for the book. We also had an edition from the former member of Parramatta, Ross Cameron, as well. And it was really quite interesting hearing from Gideon Rosner as well, who helped dissect this particular book. But I just wanted to start off by thanking you, because for those of you that don't know, Damien was the person that actually helped me with the introduction to get the Turning Point Australia brand to Australia. He's personal friends with Nigel Farage, and that came about due to a number of the tours that you helped that he was in, and he also helped pioneer tours in Australia. But Damien, let's start off with how you even got into politics. Where did that even come from, and what even drove you to write a book?
Oh, well, they're two very different questions. How did I get into politics? My family was very political. They're just, I suppose it was just dinner table conversation, extended family specifically. My great uncle, who was sort of like the godfather of our family, and in many ways, one of the senior sort of old timers in the Greek community in South Australia. Had a he was an AO. He uh, honorary life member of the Labor Party of all things as well. And like many, sort of European migrants, they came over here and they went straight to the left naturally, because the people that came over here in that, the sort of 40s and 50s were poor. If you were rich, you didn't need to leave Europe. As I suppose the Labor Party was probably, they were very good at it. Gough Whitlam certainly was, in encouraging the migration and importing the Europeans, which is fascinating to me as well when you look at the history, because they put in the White Australia policy. And we're not going to get into that.
Well, we can. I mean,
no.
No
I
holds
really
barred,
don't want
mate.
to.
You really don't want to.
No, I can't. That's a whole podcast in itself. But I think for me, politics was kind of in the blood. I kind of went the other way, not because I'm a right winger or a conservative or whatever. I think you'll find most Europeans are culturally conservative. It's just the way we are. But we're economically liberal. Wogs love a handout. And so it's not a racist thing to say. It's very simply because they came here with nothing, and the party that told them that they were going to give them the best help economically, they went with. I suppose my uncle used to call me the white sheep of the family because I went the other way. But that's how I've always followed it. It's always been of interest to me. The Greeks themselves, I think, have an inherent distrust of government and authority. It's a very interesting.
Yeah, where does that come from?
Oh, just their history. They've been
like with the Turks, or
it could be with the Turks. I think the civilization is just so bloody old. It comes from they invented democracy, for Christ's sake. So, but keeping, it's interesting. I was in Athens in 2010, and the government was trying to pass some laws in relation to transport or something like that. And in Australia, we would have just taken it on the chin, and there would have been a couple of complaints from the various trucking organisations. But these truckies descended on the Greek Parliament in a force I've never seen before. You would have thought the world was coming to an end. And I just looked at my girlfriend at the time. I said, "We're getting out of here." So we got on a plane and went back to Cyprus that night. I said, "This is not going to end well." But these are people that they don't like authority. They have an inherent distrust of it. And, they will fight for their rights, something that, Australians have only just recently started doing, which is good to see. So that's kind of how I sort of took an interest in politics. I got involved with some policy work around 2007, 2008 in South Australia, because I was born and raised in Adelaide. And that is really just a palaver, the South Australian Liberal Party. Let's just not get into that just yet. Got a couple more drinks for that one.
But you did work in around a lot.
Yeah. So,
and by the way, just make sure you're really close to the mic, because I want to make sure everyone gets the tenor of your voice. But yeah, like
I'm
with
baritone. I was one of the policy advisors to Isabel Redmond in the 2010 election. We were, we got 54% of the popular vote that year, and we needed 9 seats to win, and we only won 3, and we got all the swings in the wrong seats, right. Which taught me a lot about numbers and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's kind of my sort of foray into politics. And I helped set up Future SA, which is the fundraising arm of the Liberal Party down there. Alexander Downer was the chairman at the time, and he and I had a great time. Actually, he's actually a lot of fun, and yeah, that's. The rest of it's kind of just being in and around it. You meet a lot of people, and it's addictive. It's in the blood. It's one of those things you can't really get away from. And when you do, I moved to Sydney when I bought Penthouse. I was 32, and I swore I'd never get involved in politics again. And it's you just sit there, you just start getting itchy, and you start doing this. And as Michael Corleone said, just when you thought you're out, they pull you back in. And you can't help it, especially when you see what's going on in Australia, when you see just how incompetent these people are. You think to yourself, no one is that stupid. A country can't be run this badly. How do we manage to elect the dumbest people to office, right? But there's more to it than that. And I think for me, obviously, and that leads into my book, I'm a bit like a child. I just keep asking why, and there's the more you ask why, the further down this rabbit hole you go. And I've always loved psychology. I've always loved sociology, understanding people, how they think, why they do what they do. I'm certainly a student of it. I never went to university to study it, probably because I do not want to be a psychologist. So the idea of sitting there all day and listening to people's problems is just not something that I want to do.
Probably for the best, right?
There'd be a lot of...
It is very slanted to the left.
No, I'd just be quite brutal. Right. People come in and complain. Like,
okay, mate, as a practitioner.
You're not, there's nothing wrong with you. Just go home. Man the fuck up. But
there we go.
It is,
I'm like, ding! We're going to have the belt.
Man up. So, I think just studying it for as long, and I was very lucky. I mean, you call me a mentor. I'm nothing of the sort. I had a mentor who was actually a retired psychologist, who was a very, very dear friend, who's no longer with us, who because I used to live in the city in Adelaide, and we used to catch up for coffee every single day, at least 5 days a week, sometimes 6 if he was in town, because we used to work in similar areas, and we'd just talk for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and he'd teach me psychology and whatever. And I said, one day I might actually study this. He goes, trust me, you won't have to. He said, your intelligence doesn't need third-party certification. And there's more of a practical approach to it as well. And so when you sort of take a step back and look at Australia today, you work out very quickly that the problem is not political. It's cultural. And there's an old saying, and this is really the basis of the book, and it's often attributed to Andrew Breitbart, that says, politics is downstream from culture. And I sort of sat back and I asked the question, well, if politics is downstream from culture, then what's culture downstream from? Where does it come from? Where does a culture, where does it find its life? Where does it find its essence? Where does it, if it's the veins, what's the blood that sort of courses through it?
And no one's asking that question. So that's why it's really stood out.
Well, this is the problem when you talk about people in the political world and whatever. They're very focused on politics. And that's fair enough. That's cool. If you're a mathematician, you're focused on maths. That's just the way it is. The biggest problem that we have, however, is that they're not treating the problem, they're treating the symptoms. And politics is a symptom of a cultural collapse. And the reason our culture has collapsed is because what is further upstream from culture is values and ideas. And those have been corrupted. So what I did was I set out to work out, how did these things get corrupted in such a short period of time? Because when I left university, and I was only there for 6 months, but when I left university in 2000, 2001, the world was fine. I went out, I got a sort of job, I started working, and then I sort of lifted my head in 10 years later, and the world was a different place. And then I did it again 10 years after that, and it's like, I don't recognize this place. What happened? And so that's kind of the sort of impetus behind the book.
So before I ask my next question, Rami, how's his audio? Is it loud enough, or?
Perfect.
It's perfect? Okay, good. Yeah, I usually try to make sure it's really close. You mentioned that Aussies are just starting to really wake up, and that kind of came about because of the COVID years and people realizing that the curtain was ripped, per se. People really saw how government was actually working. You mentioned it in your book. That's kind of what prompted you to start re-entering the fray of politics, and it prompted you to sort of write this book. Was that the sort of trigger, or?
Yeah, look, when you're going to sell something, you've got to understand who you're selling to. And, the Greeks had the maxim, know thyself, as Jordan Peterson likes to say. I have the maxim, know thy customer, right? Or know thy enemy in this, when you're talking politics. And the problem is most people don't really understand the Australian people. The Australian people are very simple creatures. They just want to be left alone.
Mm.
And they'll put up with a lot of shit until they feel like they're being... It's like a teenager. Teenagers just want to be left alone to find their way in the world by themselves. And that's why they sort of rebel against their parents and all that sort of stuff. That's the psychological element. There's obviously a sort of more physiological element that goes with it as well. But that to one side. Australians do not like authority. They've never liked it. It's part of our colonial past. Regardless of, what people will tell you, Australians, this whole idea... And we've become, as a result of the internet, we've become very Americanized in the way we talk politics, in the way we try and deal with politics. And that's basically because because Australians have never really cared about politics. And for many reasons, indeed, we didn't have to for a long time because we had pretty good government and we just left it to them to do, up until sort of 2007. The problem, however, is that because we don't have our own homegrown talent, because we're not born with a flag in our hands like the Americans are, we've had to import a lot of their content. And as a result, we now start talking about the left and the right, things that, that your political diehards have spoken about for decades. But the normal average Aussie, 95% of the population, it's not left versus right for them. It's us versus them. We don't fight like this. We fight like that. That is the anti-establishment, anti-authoritarianism that Australia has always been famous for. And so when COVID came along, it wasn't so much that, the curtain was ripped. Australians are very intelligent people for the most part, and they can smell bullshit a mile away. What happened during COVID was the government overstepped their mark. Australians are happy to, put up with the over-governance, and they're happy to put up with the speed limits and whatever, and they'll complain at the pub and all that sort of stuff. But the minute you lock them in their houses, they just get the shits. And that's when it started. And as a result, which is bad for the government and the bureaucrats that actually run it, what's happening now is Aussies are now paying more attention. And they're saying, hold on, if you guys are going to do that, what else are you doing that we don't know about?
Yep.
And the good thing is, people like yourself and, Big Chocky and others, you're doing God's work because you're actually exposing it. And God bless the internet. Because the mainstream media is not going to do it. The mainstream media, for the most part, as everybody knows, you can say they're owned, you can say they're grubs. I think they're lower than shark shit, frankly. Anyone that's been on the receiving end of media attention knows that for the most part, they're full of shit.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm keeping a tally, by the way.
Oh, I'm sure you are.
But during COVID, they were bought off with the tax deductions that they were given from government. Jason Morrison shared with us, actually, the fact that we wouldn't have survived as an organization without those tax deductions. But they're meant to be the guardians of democracy, and they dropped the ball during COVID and overstepped the mark.
Oh, they
sold the government solutions. And...
Mate, they have, look, a journalist, I don't give interviews, right, for a variety of reasons, but generally because journalists already know what they're going to write. And once they get your one-liner, you're just a supporting act, right? I'll give you an idea, actually. This is actually something that I find very, very amusing.
Sure.
As you know, I didn't promote this book when I wrote it. I wrote it, and we'll get to what I did. I just wrote.
What did you say? You wrote it so that when you're like, go and read this book and then come back to me.
Yeah. Well,
I love that.
You spent a lot of time at my house during COVID, like most people did.
Yeah.
It was like a safe haven from all the bullshit that was going on.
Send the fine in the mail, guys. All right? Send the fine in the mail.
Oh, fuck them.
Fuck them.
But it was a case of you get all these people around a table.
Yeah.
All these political experts, and everybody tries to get a say. And then they come to me and they say, what do you think? And the problem with my thesis, which was still being formulated at that point, to be fair, it needed 40,000 words to write it because it's because you've got to go back 75 years to when the problem actually started. And so I thought to myself when I got out of Penthouse and I was sort of just doing nothing, kind of happy with life and spending time with my son and everything else. I'm fortunate enough to do that. I thought, you know what, I'm actually going to reduce this to writing because I'm done trying to explain it to people. And every time you start, by the way, whether it's a dinner party, people that start interrupting you.
Exactly.
Like, oh, well,
exactly.
fuck.
Yeah.
You know, so-
And but hang on, guys. You need to understand this. Like, I'm sitting there, and look, Middle Eastern background. You never interrupt your elders, especially when they know what they're talking about. I've spent many an occasion on that balcony watching people interrupt Damien. I'm like, no, I want to hear what the guy has to say. He's not even halfway through his thesis. Like, but you know what? I did notice after you wrote the book, because we caught up after, and it'd been a number of months. I was like almost 12 months. We'd seen each other for some reason, because we always talk on the phone. But you seemed relaxed, like you got it on paper.
I got it out.
Yeah, like you finally got it on paper.
I was constipated for 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, just funny. It was like a laxative.
Yeah.
And so basically, I didn't do it for the money or whatever. I just published. I put it on Amazon, and you know, one of these journalists turned around and said, you know, he's written a book. Oh, self-published. Well, fuck, I'm a publisher. Why would I pay somebody else to publish my book, you muppet? You know.
Lower than shit. Is that what you
lower
said?
than shark shit. Oh god, these people. Seriously, you know what? This is what kills me with these people, right? And anybody that's been on the receiving end of media attention knows exactly how much these people. So, I'm not going to name the outlet that wrote this, right? Because I just don't think it's fair to draw attention to the incompetence of the journalist. But the second paragraph says, it reads like this. Costas's new book, What Happened to the Lucky Country, displaying in title alone a profound ignorance of what Donald Horne really meant, was released last month. Now, Donald Horne, for context, wrote the book, The Lucky Country, okay? And the book itself I think it was published in early 1960s, 1962 or something like that. And that's the book itself is where the moniker The Lucky Country came from. So they're saying here, I called my book What Happened to the Lucky Country, and they're saying that displaying in the title alone a profound ignorance of what Donald Horne really meant. Now, the actual book, once you get past all the bullshit, doesn't start until page 14. If I can just turn to page 35, right? The Lucky Country. Australia's Lucky Country moniker was coined by author and journalist Donald Horne, who published a short polemic called The Lucky Country in 1964. He actually wasn't being complimentary. The exact quote is that Australia is a lucky country run mainly by second-rate people who share its luck. What he was saying was that Australia is complacent and that our successes at the time were more or less a result of good fortune. It's less than 20 pages in. They didn't actually read it.
No, they didn't. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, they didn't even read the book. Damien actually put it in there.
No, the whole book is based on his original analysis of why, Australia is going to eventually, as Lee Kuan Yew said, become the poor white trash of Asia.
Yeah.
And so the journalists in this country, and it's not all of them. Some of them are actually really good.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we just keep hearing from the shit ones.
Well, all the good ones move overseas, like Adam Crichton,
Well, I think he's back, isn't he? He's at the IPA or something like that.
I wouldn't blame him for leaving anyway.
No, well, I mean, I think he did a stint in America for a while, but I mean, Adam's great. I love Adam. But yeah, it's really a shame.
Can I ask? You mentioned that Australia is too young, like we hadn't developed our culture. That's what you said in the book. What did you exactly mean by that? Is it a matter like 250 years? I mean, how long to develop a culture, sort of thing?
Well, there's a variety, and again, you're kind of cherry picking that. If you don't fight for your values, you never have to chisel them in stone. And Australia never really. We inherited our institutions. They were British. They came from Britain, the Magna Carta and everything else. And Australia was still finding its way. And its own identity, which is very, very different to the we don't venerate the Poms. We don't like them very much, especially when it comes to cricket and whatever. But they are our wise old uncles, and where we come from. And what I talked about in the book was that Australia was still finding its way. We didn't actually have our own national anthem until 1984, when Bob Hawke made the permanent switch from God Save the Queen to Advance Australia Fair. Which is very different to America, who literally was born in blood. They fought for their freedoms, from the British, they obviously had hundreds of years, to sort of code that into their culture. Again, the British fought for their freedoms from the Romans, etc. Most countries have had quite a long time to get their shit together. Australia, we were young. We're a young country, and I think we were still finding our way in many ways. But a shock like what I talk about in the book, it happened. If it had happened to, we don't. How do I put this? We didn't have the time to set up the institutions to withstand the shock that what I call the perfect storm actually thrust upon Western society, and effectively, we've got to get into that, I suppose. Our government went woke because of the hordes of social justice warriors that were spilling out of the universities. The universities wouldn't have done so much damage had the kids not been conditioned into victimhood by social media. Social media wouldn't have found such fertile ground in the minds of these kids had they not been weakened by their helicopter parents. And those parents wouldn't have been so overprotective had they grown up in a more stable home and environment. And so when you actually do the math and go backwards, the problem that we're seeing now that's happening all over the world, in the Western world, but specifically in Australia, and while we're suffering almost the most out of it, is because it started 75 years ago, after World War II, when you go through and again, that's all part of the book. It's very difficult to sort of summarize in.
Yeah, but the theme being what's upstream from culture, you actually go into it, and this blew my mind. Because you coming up, and this kind of goes to your roots on, the Greek Cypriot side. The Greek Cypriots, the Italians that came out in after the Second World War, and for me, I really connected with the book because obviously Middle Eastern background. We kind of didn't start a step back because we still had that family sort of.
Well,
structure.
The family, yeah. So when we start, the problem is the breakdown of the family. So there's effectively 5 parts of the perfect storm that happened all in one hit over a period of 75 years. It was just one thing after another. And so the breakdown of the nuclear family, the nuclear family was actually a 1950s experiment and a failed one at that, right? Before that, we lived in sort of bigger tribes of extended families sort of thing. The nuclear family came about as a result of the post-war economic boom, suburbanization, people moving out into the suburbs, then obviously the advancements in technologies, which really came about as a result of putting military technology to civilian use. Things like dishwashers, microwave ovens, all that sort of stuff that actually came out in the 1950s, gave women more time to do other things. And then obviously you had things like the pill and the women's liberation movement that came along. And then after that, you had things like no-fault divorce laws, which then empowered women into, we had second-wave feminism. And then obviously that started splitting up the family a little bit. And our traditional roles that we'd had for thousands of years, all of a sudden in one generation just disappeared. And so the kids, the baby boomers specifically, were the first generation to start feeling these shocks of insecurity. And so if you look at someone like Abraham Maslow, talks about the human needs to achieve self-fulfillment and other things. And obviously he displays it in sort of a pyramid where down the bottom is your basic needs like food, shelter, and water. And then the next most basic need is security. People need security. Human beings need security in order to survive.
Yeah.
And what we found here is this, starting in the 1950s, families breaking down, etc. Not as many mentors around by extended families. They say it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
These kids were the first ones to sort of start feeling a little bit insecure. So what happens is when they have kids of their own, they swear it's not going to happen to them. So they overparent them. The problem with overparenting or helicopter parenting is that it actually psychologically weakens the kids. Now, there's a variety of things about helicopter parenting, which this is where it starts getting a little bit scientific. with helicopter parenting,
And just while you find that, just so you guys know, Damien's not a doctor, but if you go to the back of the book, there is 4 whole pages. Sorry, don't bring that up, Rami. That's the hierarchy of needs. I'll bring that in a sec. In the back of the book, he's literally got 4 pages, literally of study, all to do with, and he references it in the book, studies that are like 100-page each of what he's read. So he's very well read on the topics. But in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is what that pyramid looks like, where at the top, where at the bottom, you've got the psychological needs, then you've got safety and security, then love and belonging, then self-esteem, then self-actualization. You need to build that up. You can't just, when you're raising a child, it does take a village to raise a child. And I love that you talk about how that not happening ends up creating a demand in the universities. But I'll let you read the...
Well, the point is that, helicopter parents went to enormous lengths to protect their kids from harm, both physical and emotional. They put limits on outdoor play because of safety concerns. They over-sanitized their kids' environments to prevent illness. They chose their friends and hovered during play dates. They went into bat against teachers. When I was a kid... Oh, fuck.
You were in trouble.
When I was in trouble. I remember the teacher rang home once to actually saying to my mum about something good that I'd done.
Yeah.
And when my mum found out that the teacher called, I got a preemptive backhander just in case. So what did you do? I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And
in Arabic, we'd call it the shahito, Rami, wouldn't we? It's where you get the thong and it's like a boomerang. Like your mother just had a phenomenal aim. Or the wooden spoon.
Yeah. My mum would hit me with a broom. Whatever she could reach for, whatever was available.
She couldn't pick up the sink, so.
But no. I know, mate. She would have tried. Don't worry. What happened is it stunted kids' independence as well, and so. The problem is this. A lot of people turn around and say, oh, that's just psychological. It's not. When you look at the science behind this, it is so upsetting in as much as, and it explains so much as well. When you go to great lengths to protect your children, you don't let them explore for themselves. You actually cause permanent neurological underdevelopment, right? Now, what I'm talking about specifically is nerve endings in the brain. When you're a kid and you go and try and jump across a dry creek and you misjudge it and you fall over, right? Kids have a lot more neuroplasticity in their brain, right? Which is basically nerve endings. They're nerves that haven't actually formed yet. Right. And you talk about myelination, which is actually the white matter tracts, that actually this fatty substance that covers these nerve endings. And when you actually learn something, especially physical, even with toddlers, it's fascinating. If you put 2 toddlers that can't speak yet opposite each other, they learn to communicate with voice tone and body language and facial expressions, and they learn how to do that. One of the reasons that the kids today aren't actually very good at, sort of reading the room is because they grew up on a screen. They didn't grow up learning that stuff. Yeah. Same as I say, when you're going to go and jump across a creek, when you do that and you miss as a kid, the nerve ending physically forms in the brain and you won't do it badly again. You learn how to judge distance and all that sort of stuff. But if you lock a kid in a house and don't let it go out, right, or hover over it or whatever. Yeah, like you're not only
COVID babies, forgive me saying.
Yeah, the COVID babies. Yeah, you not only stunt their psychological and their sociological development, you're actually stunting their physical development as well. And so, if you don't have to, for example, problem solving, a lot of these kids that came out of that environment didn't learn to problem solve, and as a result, their inability to problem solve, their brain is underdeveloped, and as a result, they're only capable of binary thought. So when someone turns around and says something that you can't comprehend, oh, you're a racist. Understand? This is not something that was just taught to them.
Yeah.
This is actually a lot deeper than that. And there's so many studies on this.
And if I can just say, Damien, this goes to the crux and the overarching why I like this book so much, because it's encapsulated at the start of the book with a conversation between, because the forward was written by Mark Latham, conversation he had with Malcolm Roberts, which is kind of a humorous conversation, but it kind of encompasses what's going on. Obviously, my audience, last 5-6 years, we've been trying to make sense of what the hell's going on. Why is everything coordinated? Is it the World Economic Forum? Is it like, the Prime Minister got the call and there's dirt on him? And obviously Epstein files coming out. Like, there's a lot of people that I think we do think that things run a lot smoother and there's one world government and
people are looking for simple answers when the answer's not so simple. I tried to simplify it as much as I could. And again, this is just my thesis. I'm not necessarily suggesting that I'm right. I like to think that I am, but I'm not saying I'm not.
It gave me pause. It gave me a lot of pause,
I think what you need to do is try and understand the beast that you're dealing with, which is, but I suppose this is where it gets really interesting. These people, these underdeveloped minds, right? And everyone says they blame social media. Social media added fuel to the fire. That was the next part of the perfect storm. So you've got these overprotected kids that have now underdeveloped both emotionally, psychologically, and physically, physiologically. That now you go and hand them, because they're completely insecure, right? Now you go and hand them this device, right, that effectively just drives their insecurity into overdrive. Right. And you fast forward 10 years, you've got girls saying, "Oh, I'm actually a boy."
Yeah. And as you say, it incentivizes it. Social media rewards that victimhood mindset.
And so what I try and do is explain the social media aspects in terms of the science behind it, how it actually, how the social media networks created that dopamine drip that constantly going back for it. They worked out what people were actually reacting to, and it turned out that grievance was the one thing that people kept going to. So you created this victimhood, right? And then this is it's so difficult to explain unless you actually sit down and read the entire thing, because there's so many moving parts to it.
And I'm trying not to spoil the whole book as well.
Yeah, and I'm trying not to as well, because
honestly, it is the best book if you just go through the whole thing. It honestly was the easiest read, and if I can pay you this compliment, it was one of the easiest with regards to the flow.
That was the hardest part, is actually making it simple, because the science behind it. But like the problem is with social media, the hyper-sterilized environment that created by parents produced this generation fundamentally ill-equipped for life's realities. And so, having never grappled with obstacles during their development, they failed to build basic problem-solving capabilities, while intensive social micromanagement left them disconnected from the nuanced dance of human relationships. So when deep-seated insecurity took root, the resulting victimhood mentality seeped into every corner of daily life, manifesting in corrosive self-talk and persistent sense of being inherently broken. Fishing for sympathy, the helicopter generation found social media. I'm just going to sort of try and go through this without spoiling it. But social media platforms were the ideal arenas for ventilating this new victim mentality, a space in which personal battles were not just shared, but perversely celebrated, right? So people actually rewarded one another with likes and shares every time they posted a story of struggle, right? Once they got to that, victimhood became social currency. The more layers of victimhood that you had, or shame, it's actually shame and acceptance, and that's another level of psychology again, which I actually go into as a separate area. But shame became social currency. So the more you basically said, "Oh, I'm a victim because of X, Y, Z," that was like personal shame, and as a result of that, that became a social currency. So the more shame that you had, the more likes and shares you got, the more the dopamine drip of social media, that was the validation that came with it. It is so fascinating.
And
Jonathan Haidt. Yeah, no, you're right.
I've got the coddling of American Mind behind me. You just reminded me of what he said. He said one of the best predictors that a young person will hop on the next trend is that the previous trend with this stuff. So if it was like, I'm bi today, tomorrow could be trans, because that's the new cool thing, and you want to stay.
It's also insecurity, right? What these kids are trying to do is fit in, and so when you see these, and you don't have to go very far, just go to a climate rally. When you see these obese people with bright blue hair and rings that look like a bull, in their nose, they just want you to think they're alternative by choice. They're not. They just know that if they take all the clown makeup off, they're not going to be able to compete with everything that they see on social media, which is your thirst trap photos and your hot girls in bikinis and whatever. So if they paint themselves up to look like a rodeo clown, then they're alternative by choice, right? Now, I'm not saying, it's really sad because deep down, it's just a kid crying out for acceptance, and when you've got that en masse, right? And this is the worst part, because stage 4 of the perfect storm, these kids were then hurled into university, or they went to university, and university not only introduced them to postmodernism and Marxism, but it validated their feelings of victimhood. Because what happened was they didn't actually turn around and slap the hell out of them and say, swallow a teaspoon of cement and wake the fuck up.
It wasn't
the
military.
No, it wasn't the military. They went there and they said, well, actually, because Marxism and postmodernism are ideologies based on victimhood, because the serfs are being oppressed by the bourgeois, right? And so ultimately, when you turn around, you get these kids that are completely insecure. They won't take responsibility for themselves because they've been overparented their whole lives. If you turn around and say to them, well, it's not actually your fault, it's society's fault, you're being oppressed, they completely validated them.
Why do they have to change?
Why do they have? Well, it's not their fault, right? So then, from there, and that's the education part of it was actually my least favorite to write.
Sure.
Right. But
you made a great point in it. If I can just remind you, you said in the book.
I've forgotten most of what I wrote.
Well, I think it's because it's more fresh in my mind. That's why I'm so passionate about that.
In a year.
But with that particular part of the book, you said it created the market with the overparenting, with social media, it created the market for the products that the universities were selling. Previously, they weren't buying. The kids weren't buying.
They weren't buying it because they didn't have to, right? And obviously, when they left university, they went and got a job. But they were far more secure individuals.
So self-esteem was there. They were loved.
They were security, all that sort of stuff. Now, they're not. But this is the interesting thing: the universities got smart because Marxism is trying to redistribute wealth. That's what Karl Marx was trying to do, because he was just a fat lazy prick, right? The problem is that it wasn't selling because we've already got the minimum wage. Australia is probably one of the most egalitarian societies in the world. So what are they trying to do? Now they're trying to redistribute status. That's exactly what wokeism is.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's music to the ears of these perpetually aggrieved helicopter kids, right? Because now they don't actually have to try and compete.
Yeah.
The world should give them the status that they deserve because that's just the way it is.
Because tall poppy syndrome. Yeah. Look, to an extent.
Well,
that
Australia,
comes up
and again, the tall poppy syndrome in Australia, you don't see that in America. In America, they pick their own up and they put them on their shoulders. I mean, Trump would never have survived in Australia, right? A buffoon like Trump would never have survived the tall poppy syndrome in Australia. We don't like that sort of shit. But in Australia, we kind of level people out quite nicely. And I think, to be honest, would Australia be better off without tall poppy syndrome? Probably. I think we'd be a lot more competitive, certainly economically.
Yeah.
A lot of good ideas go offshore because people, that tall poppy syndrome seeps into our economics as well. It seeps into the business community. And, I've co-founded a couple of things. And, one of our companies, I went to America with it because I'm going to find success in America. Where in Australia, they're like, it's not bad, et cetera, et cetera. In America, they thought it was best thing since sliced bread.
And we see this all the time. We see artists, we see comedians, we see business owners, even.
Have you seen Shark?
They all got Shark Tank. Yeah,
It's like
we don't really have that here.
No, we do have it.
No, but it's not incentivized, the culture of success and all of that. And so can we blame the best? It's a brain drain. We're losing the best and brightest to America where they're actually valued.
The problem is we're not stupid. We invented a lot of things in this country. The IVF program, the wine casket, the cochlear ear implant. A lot of it came out of Adelaide of all places as well.
Black Box. Even Murdoch came out of Adelaide.
And he never went back.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. That's the point. Yeah.
Look, Adelaide's a great place. It's just got, bodies in barrels and all sorts of other problems. But look, I love Adelaide. And the thing is, very forward-thinking place. and they lose their best and brightest to the Eastern Seaboard, which then ultimately loses them to the United States.
All right. Before we go further, you mentioned that there's a lot of things going on hormonally, chemically, because of what's been going on. You're not developing your brain, the neurons aren't fully firing, and physically, we start to see things going on where even people are getting lower in testosterone. Can you talk a bit more?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you don't, cortisol, which is the basic stress hormone, that suppresses testosterone. And now what we've seen since 1980 is actually a 1% year-on-year decrease in testosterone. So a male born today has 40% less testosterone.
And is that linked to increase in cortisol? Or
is that what, sorry?
is it linked to increasing cortisol as well?
Yes, absolutely. It's linked to increasing cortisol. It's linked to diet and exercise, the fact that we're not getting as much as we used to. It's linked to a whole heap of things. And so, you only have to look at men, just basic body shape. I'm not talking about bodybuilders or whatever. You look at basic body shape and videos from the 1960s, and then walk down the street today, probably not Oxford Street, maybe somewhere else, but men are completely emasculated. And the muscle tone is less. All the things that testosterone sort of feeds is considerably less.
And that's why we see these patterns at these climate rallies, these LGBT rallies.
Testosterone's more than that as well. Absolutely. But it's more than that. It's your risk hormone. It's what makes you a man. It's what makes, and, it drives you. And this is the thing as well. I mean, the epigenetic studies are demonstrating, epigenetics being, the baby in the womb, the hormonal imbalance and the stress that women are under, and not just women, by the way, men. There's fascinating studies that show that if a man is stressed, because we make sperm, I think, every 6 to 8 weeks, and if you're stressed, really badly stressed during that period, it'll imprint on the sperm, which is effectively your DNA. That then the fetus will then carry.
Is that only during that period? Like, does it for the next 6 weeks? Does that embedding go away, or?
We can, yeah. If you're not stressed, that will change. That whatever you can imprint. Yes, yes. To answer your question, the same as a woman. The hormonal environment in the womb for a fetus is super important. So if a woman has a hormonal imbalance courtesy of cortisol, stress hormone, diet, exercise, alcohol, whatever, it's going to lead to problems with the fetus. And there's a huge link, which I don't really want to go into now because it's probably going to cause
get cancelled.
It's all right. Cause it to get cancelled. Yeah, but they say when you look at the increased stress levels and the cortisol levels and the other stuff that's been going on in the last 50 years, the link between that and sexual preference and that sort of behavior, sexual behaviors, is really fascinating.
We've talked about that on the show. We played a video, but then looked at the study with, I can't remember which doctor it was, but it was Tate. The trigger was Tate was talking about a study that was done where all these girls, some of which were Andrew Tate was talking about this.
It was a
real study. It was actually a real study, but he was basically saying there's some women on birth control, some that weren't. They gave these shirts to these men of varying testosterone levels. It turns out the pattern that came out was, and I think we've talked about this, the women that went for the lower testosterone men, when they smelt the shirts, like they pick, they actually went for the shirts because of the pheromones or whatever. They went for the shirts with the men that had lower testosterone levels. So the women that were on birth control, they went for the men with lower testosterone levels, whereas the women that weren't on birth control, they went for the men with high testosterone levels. And it's just like, well, hang on a sec, what is going on with the pheromones and the hormones? And
look, we've completely fucked up our physiology. There's no doubt about that. You don't have to be. I mean, I read a fascinating study which I actually included in this only because I referenced a very small part of it, and my wife was like, "You can't put that in there,"
And that doesn't even go into, because I think you did make reference to this in the book, but you didn't go into it because obviously the book's got to be short. But you didn't even go into depth about also the chemical stuff we're using, the palm olive oil, that sort of stuff. Like,
again, that's
the food we have, the fast food.
The thing is, a lot of people have written books on that stuff, and I didn't want to double up on it. I referenced them.
Yeah, you did,
Jonathan Haidt. I referenced Jonathan Haidt quite a lot. I referenced Alan and Barbara Pease. Sorry?
And a Barbara Pease, but
I love
not
Barbara
O'Neill, not
Pease.
O'Neill. She's not a doctor, yeah.
No, not Barbara. Oh, Barbara. Look, I love Barbara O'Neill. I think
Yeah,
she's fantastic.
Yeah. She's been on the show.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, she needed the cushions too. Yeah, she's a bit shorter. So.
Oh, really? Yeah, she's shrinking, is she?
Yeah.
She needs more protein. Yeah, it's... What was I saying?
You were saying that with testosterone levels, I mentioned the fact that the food and the
other people have written about that, so I said, no, I'm going to stay away from it.
But
My thesis really focused on how we kind of got to where we are, and that's the family and the overparenting stuff. That's kind of the earlier stuff. I think where it gets really interesting is how all this relates to Australia today, and that was the last sort of bit of the perfect storm, which is government, and how these people that are really a minority, by the way. The people that I'm talking about only represent about 10 or 15% of the country.
Yeah.
But they now have a power base completely disproportionate to their size because they are the bureaucrats and they work in the big corporations and they now control everything that we see, do, hear, eat.
Yeah. So it all ends up flowing into every institution. And
correct. And so this perverse ideology that they have basically curated over time, has now found its way into public policy.
Yeah.
And this is probably where your audience will want to know, how does all the shit that I'm talking about actually work? What I'm trying to help people understand is that the problem is not political. You need to understand the people that you're dealing with. These people are not normal. They are maladjusted. They're psychologically underdeveloped.
Yep.
They've got some serious fucking issues.
Yep.
And when you see them protesting and when you hear them talk online, and even the people that, that actually go into bat for them, some of the people
Senate estimates, for example, we see it. I mean,
mate, the smugness.
No, but like that, they believe what they're saying. Like, and I believe that they believe what they're saying.
They do.
But we just disagree with them. And it's like, but you're right. Like, that's the surface level. There's
the
this
entitlement that comes with it. And I talk about entitlement and how that relates to victimhood in the book. But when they go to Senate estimates and someone asks them a question and they just give this shit-eating grin, this smirk, it's like, well, I'll just take that on notice. Yeah. Well, fuck no, you won't. You'll answer the question. What are you doing here? Unprepared.
That's right.
But then they're completely unaccountable and they don't want to be accountable. It's just the way they were raised.
Yeah.
In many ways. So, there are a lot of generalizations in all this, and you probably get some criticism for it, but a thesis has to sort of start somewhere.
Sure.
And
I do want to get your thoughts on the bureaucrats thing in a sec, but can I mention anecdotally? You mentioned, I remember I said to you one time after reading the book, that makes so much sense about the testosterone levels, because when I go and do the grip test thing with a lot of my, let's say, Anglo peers that are, let's say 8th generation Aussies.
What grip test? You hanging around Mardi Gras?
No, different kind of, no. Their parade was cancelled this year, actually.
Was it?
I tell you,
got rained out, did it?
No, they spent all the money. I
kind of like Mardi Gras. I live in Darlinghurst.
Yeah, well, there you go. But no, you said, no, Joel, it's because that it makes so much sense in this book. Like, don't get me wrong, my testosterone levels living in this country or whatever I've been through in my life, it's lower than my father's, but at the same time, it's still higher than those that have been here for a number of generations. But my kids are gonna, who knows? It'll keep going down.
It's going to keep plummeting. It's going to keep plummeting.
Yeah.
And that's
You know about it, because when you go and test for your testosterone, number one is they don't test for your freak testosterone count. Number two is their average is a male between 17 and 72 or something, which means your average is not for your age, as you know, testosterone decline with age.
Yeah.
Comparing you to an older man who already...
It's the same thing, and Barbara O'Neill probably would have said something along these lines as well, in terms of when you do your blood test, they've got the reference range, which is what the doctors use, and then you've got the functional range, which is what a healthy individual should be. So, for example, with vitamin D, and I do not want to be quoted on this, but I believe it's somewhere between... the reference range for the doctors is somewhere between 60 and 160, right? I think it's whatever units they measure it in.
Yep.
The functional range is between 120 and 160. That's where you should be,
right,
for vitamin D, right? But when they create the reference ranges, a lot of the time they're not taking it from exceptionally healthy individuals. They're taking it as an average of people, from hospitalized patients to healthy people in the street.
Yeah.
And so, it's the same with testosterone. That reference range is considerably varied, and it's not right. You really should be here, and that is a problem. Absolutely.
Yeah. You were leading into the bureaucrats and what we call on the show of like the deep state, and it's sort of the low resolution of way of saying a coordinated opposition in the government that's basically seems to be attacking the people. That's what a lot of people out there see. The thesis of the book, and it makes total sense to me. I totally agree with it. This is a long time coming upstream beyond culture. This is biological. This has been a huge chain of events, including social media in the universities. You pointed me to an interesting interview, which I watched on the way here, between John Anderson and Newman. He was
Newman, yeah.
Mark Newman, was it?
Mike.
Mike. So Mike, he's another one. He works in Japan now. He's not in Australia. But he talked about this, the fact that 8 out of 10 new employees in Australia have basically been added in the public sector. We have 300 and what was
58,000 in the federal, and I think 2.2 million or something at a state level. One in 17, I think. And what's interesting as well, I haven't seen the full interview, but I have seen snippets of it. I just haven't had time. But I'm wondering whether those numbers are actually just full-time government employees, or whether they actually take into consideration the contractors as well that loiter around Canberra, that aren't actually employees of the government. Yeah. They are just contracted for 3 days a week or whatever, that make a shitload of money. But the perverse nature of modern Australia and its bureaucracy, where when I was a kid, you had two options when you were going to leave school. You go into the private sector and compete, and you earn good money, or you take 20% less and you go and work for the public sector. You've got a solid paycheck. You've got you're there for life pretty much. There's job security. You've got a great superannuation, good working conditions, but you get 20% less. Some of the stuff that Newman was talking about, where you've got, the heads of departments are earning $600,000 and $700,000 a year, and then their deputies under them are between $400,000 and $500,000, and then you got the people under them that are between $300,000 and $400,000. You're sitting there thinking to yourself, "Fuck, I've got to kill people to make that sort of money."
And it's totally flipped. It's totally flipped. The small to and medium businesses that are private are going under. In my industry of construction, and this was what forced me into politics. It was the fact that I got made redundant. The company I worked with was very efficient, very good at what they did. The trades went for 3 generations that they had in building. They went under. And once I saw them go under, I knew more businesses were coming. I was no longer in a secure industry. At least 30 to 50,000 construction companies have gone under since the end of COVID. No wonder there's a housing crisis. They're like, "Oh no, we're doing great numbers." No wonder there's a housing crisis, guys. I mean, and this is the real problem. I mean, the idea that we're going to be relying on the public sector to generate the economic tax base for society. We're running out of taxpayers. Oh
no, the government is employing them.
Yeah.
So it gives them $600,000 a year, and then it takes 200.
Yeah. No. Look, obviously, but in terms of we have more. They're not incentivized like a private business.
There's no incentives. They don't have to be.
Yeah, to be efficient, not at all. They do not bear a price for the consequences of their actions, as Thomas Sowell talks about. And we see this when you compare it to other countries. We have more bureaucrats in Australia than any other country in the world per capita. And on top of that, they're paid way more.
They're also extraordinarily powerful. And this is one of the things when, and I tried to go into it in the book, and to try and actually make people understand the paradox in psychology, from where these people came from, right? The way they were raised, how they were brainwashed, etc.
Yeah.
There was an Austrian psychotherapist called Alfred Adler. He was a Freud protege, actually.
Oh.
And he posited the theory of the inferiority complex. And effectively, it's the tendency of insecure people to overcompensate into what becomes a superiority complex. And so what happened was he observed how feelings of inferiority could transform into an overwhelming need for control. And the will to dominate. And that it didn't just manifest in individuals. When you put them all together, it manifested in groups. And what we see when you look at these people and the way that the bureaucracy and big corporations, for that matter, this sort of in the past, you had this sort of very thinly veiled sort of
Narcissistic.
no, it's not narcissistic. It's just the way that the government and the private sector kind of, sort of interacted.
Incestuous.
Well, it is now,
Yeah.
yeah. But these people, I think, I say in the book that, the most insecure generation in living memory didn't take to power well. And when they found their way into positions of authority, their victimhood complex didn't disappear. It metastasized. And it's really, really interesting when you look at how the bureaucracy operates and the like-mindedness of everybody in it. And as you say in Senate estimates, they all act the same way. They're completely unaccountable. They don't give a fuck who's asking them the questions.
Yeah.
And they're going to give them the answers that they feel like giving them.
Yeah.
Like it or lump it.
And an example is the Bureau of Statistics. If you remember the numbers, it's meant to be a $4 million website.
Oh, no, the Bureau of Meteorology.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Bureau of Meteorology.
96 million.
96 million instead of 9 Rami, and it doesn't work particularly well. The reason we found out about this is because people are like, how much did this cost? And it's like, well, the
Didn't
budget
work
was
as well as the old one.
That's crazy. That's just like what happened with a shitty website in the UK. That's like,
yeah.
they paid a couple of $1 million and it turned out it was vibe code.
Yep.
Like it was one prompt to AI that built the website.
But the problem is, mate, if you did this in the private sector, you'd go to jail.
So, that's right.
Seriously.
That's
The company would prosecute you to the full extent of the law. Here, they ask them the questions and they're like, yeah, well, we'll just take that on notice.
That's right.
They don't have an answer for it, and they don't actually feel like giving one. And that again, there's a psychology behind that, and I do try and get into that there. The chat about the bureaucracy, and obviously you want to talk about how to fix all this, which I don't have all
that would be nice.
I don't have all the answers, but I've got a few suggestions.
Sure.
But we just take a step back. The people that are championing this stuff as well, in people like yourself, but your opposite numbers, that's just as frustrating, because not everybody that I'm talking about went to work for the government. Some of them are still running around loose. The zoo opened its doors and the animals are still running. Reminds me of a scene in Naked Gun 2.5 where Leslie Nielsen crashes a tank through the zoo and all the animals escape. And he goes to a party that night and the commissioner's just getting off the phone, putting down the phone. She's just horrified. And he goes up to her and he says, good evening, Commissioner. You're looking lovely tonight. She says, do you realize that because of you, this city is being overrun by baboons? And he goes, well, isn't that the fault of the voters?
Yeah.
Delivered as only
Quite
Leslie
apt.
Nielsen can.
Yeah.
But, the problem is that, I see you on, debating some of these people, and it's just...
Sorry, you can say her name. She's not Voldemort.
Who?
Abby Chatfield.
I wasn't thinking about her, but now I am.
I haven't debated many people because they won't get on camera with you. They don't like being exposed to opposing ideas.
I saw that interview.
But you saw her mind break, and this is exactly what you're talking about in the book. It literally breaks when you say, I think immigration's too high. She just couldn't register it.
Well, again,
and also, I don't believe in climate change as she does. I was like, I don't think it's as man-made as you think. I think a lot of it's just happening because, the world changes. It's always changed.
Look, listening to... I don't really want to talk about it very much, but listening to that woman talk politics is like watching high school Shakespeare.
She's a great person to study.
Here's the thing. I'll just say this, okay? I am a free speech zealot. You can say whatever you like, and I will defend to the death your right to say it. That said, just because you can say something doesn't mean that you should, okay? Now, the Arabs have a saying, okay, and I believe, loosely translated, I think it says, if a man is born to be a water carrier, he'll never be happy as a sultan. And what that means,
Gonna have to
right?
fact it.
What you can fact check me. What it means is that, embrace your destiny. Be happy with your lot in life, right? And I would just say that when your greatest contribution to political discourse in this country is dancing provocatively with an oversized toothbrush, perhaps your God-given talents might find their natural home behind a paywall, not necessarily talking politics. And look, it's as Richard Burton once said of Elizabeth Taylor, allegedly, when asked why he married her a second time, she has two very good assets. So
this alone is going to be the thing that goes viral, obviously.
I don't,
No, but
I don't
look,
want it to go viral. That's just my opinion on the matter.
Sure, I appreciate your honesty. You've always been honest and never watered it down one iota. But when I was engaging with her, and I read this book after the fact, I did feel sorry for a lot of this generation where that's happened. I like genuinely, if you put
It's not their
yourself,
fault.
it's not their fault.
It's not.
And
That's what I'm trying to say.
and I'm not trying to say that as a patronizing thing to Hannah or Abby. It is genuinely like, do you remember that episode where Abby was crying?
Yeah.
And Avi had me on with Rukshan and they were laughing at her. And I said, guys, I'm sorry. Like, I just can't, because I understand too much. I understand it. And I just, the problem is they've been hard done by this upstream thing that's happened. And here they are, a broken individual. We've actually failed as a country, and they genuinely believe what they're saying.
Oh no, we failed. We failed as a generation. This thing is not just limited to Australia. This has happened all over the world. I mean, the Yanks gave us woke, right? We didn't invent it. We just imported it, like we import everything else, right? Because the only thing we're good for in this country now is building apartments for migrants and selling overpriced coffees to each other
And shipping minerals overseas without
well, but again, I mean,
and
see,
adding
this is the
value.
thing. Not everybody's like that. I mean, take Conrad for example. I mean, the man. I love the man. I think
great.
He's doing a great job, even though I don't agree with everything he says politically.
Sure.
I think he's doing a great job. Yeah. Sam, is it Bamford?
Bamford, yeah.
Yeah,
Too old
great.
to blood,
yeah. He's doing a great job. Yeah. He's of that generation too. You can see how it affected some people. And look, the thing is this. And this is what's really interesting, okay? This is not tribal. This is not, everybody that's suffering from this has gone to the left, okay? What's really, really important to understand, and I actually say it here, and I actually...
Wow, he's about to blow my mind.
He's
actually about to blow my mind. I just realized.
No, I'm not going to blow your mind, but what I'm saying is this. You know, you talk about... I actually had to reference it because I just wanted to make sure it was in the right section, and it is. It's in government. But, you know, you talk about this, and I hear you talk about the Liberal Party and how it's gone to the left and all this other stuff. Like government, political organisations are simply made up of people, and they're made up of their members, and they're made up of the people that have found their way into positions of power. Now, when you say the Liberal Party's gone to the left, they become, you know, they've become... What I mean, how do you say it? You say Labor light, right?
Yeah, Labor light. They're not standing for
they're all
Menzies' belief statement.
They're all thinking the same way.
They believe in big government. Government should solve everything, rather than what Menzies stood for, who founded the party, which is the individual.
Right.
You know, your own strength, your own back. You know, self-esteem.
The problem is these kids that are now in their 40s that have found their way into positions of power in the party, and indeed in many other areas. The problem is not tribal, it's generational, because they still came from universities, they still grew up with social media, they were raised by helicopter parents. Their victimhood mentality is exactly the same as their opposite numbers. They're no less whiny, entitled, or prone to the victimhood complex than any other of their cohort. They just found a different group to join.
That's right.
So this thing here, it's not just attacking the Hannahs and the Abbeys of the world. It's everywhere. It's happened to an entire generation. And if we're going to have any chance of fixing it, we need to start looking in the mirror and looking at the way we, you know, what we eat, what we drink, how we raise our kids, what we teach them, right? Limiting their screen time, because it is damaging their brains. Now, I did not agree with the under-16s ban. It's not for government to be doing that. However, on the other hand, mate, I'm very happy about it in the way that it just gets these kids off of it.
In relation to
what this, yeah.
No, but you know, it's so funny because we talked at length and you really opened my eyes to it, and I hadn't read the book at that point. The fact that, no, it's not for no reason. Don't get me wrong, like we were like, and you share my libertarian streak on this, the government should stay out of it. This is the job of the parents. But the parents have failed. We're in damage control right now.
Well, the parents are scared of their kids. Most parents, and in fact, I've had interactions with a few of them. They were welcoming it because now they can just turn around to their kids that they've got problems with, and they say, you know what, the government's made it illegal. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
They don't actually have. If I wasn't allowed to play Nintendo during the school week,
Yeah.
mate, if my mum saw me playing Nintendo again, the broom, mate, you know me, broom, she broke on my head because of that fucking Nintendo.
We never got the broom.
You didn't get the broom?
Well, it was the belt. It was the
No, I never got the
slippers,
belt.
It was the wooden spoon, and then also you really stuffed up. If it was me, like you really, like it wasn't my dad, it was my mum. But you really stuffed up if it was my dad and grabbed me by the ear. Like you really, he never laid a hand on me.
Sideburn.
But the eyebrows. But no.
Are you a Greek waiter? Sideburns? Who has sideburns as a kid?
But
Fucking hell.
Rami was born with a full beard.
Yeah, I can see that.
But to be clear, not for a second are we saying. Obviously, there's the dangers of digital ID and how that links to, let's call it the surveillance state. That's where we're coming from with it. But there is a significant problem that this book outlines with regards to where these problems have come from psychologically with parenting. Parents have failed, and you explain exactly why and how and.
But it's not everybody, and this is the thing. The people that we're talking about, that I'm being fairly generalization. There's a lot of generalizing going on here, but the people that I'm talking about really only represent 10-15% of the population, right? But they now wield an extraordinary amount of power. And this is where it gets really interesting in terms of politics. You've got the Liberal Party, right, trying to chase the inner city seats in Sydney and Melbourne, right, that are now very densely populated with what we call the laptop class, right? We've just established that almost 20% of the country works for the government. They're on some seriously good money. Who do you think lives in all these seats?
Yeah.
People that work for government and big corporations. And these are what I like to call sourdough socialists, right? The Liberal Party, if it goes back to its roots, they shouldn't be focusing on those seats. That's gone. And those people will continue to vote Till because voting Greens after 30 is a sign of bad breeding, right? They'll either vote Labor or they'll vote Till because Till ultimately lets them, turn around and say, look, I'm still doing the right thing. I'm not voting Liberal because they're all capitalist pigs, but at the same time, they don't have to vote Green and be ashamed of it for, a variety of reasons. So there's a whole
It's like a trendy thing.
It's a trendy thing. Yeah, it is. And,
That blew my mind when you said it. I remember when you said it before the election, you predicted the outcome. I was like,
yeah, well, and the Tills are going to hold on to those seats for a while until the Liberal Party works out that, Forgotten Australia is living, west of George Street.
Yeah.
It's
in the suburbs. It's
burbs.
actually in the old Labor areas.
Yeah, well, I mean, and this is the thing. I mean, we're seeing it with Farage, in the UK. His vote is just as many disgruntled Labor voters. I would argue even more disgruntled Labor voters as many as there is Conservatives. And my fear for Nigel is that, because they got first past the post, he just falls short. I don't think he will, right? But I can't predict what's going to happen 3 years from now. I'm concerned, and the thing is this: when you bring it back home, what a lot of people is fascinating when you look at the numbers. People turn around and they say, "Oh, you've got 27% for One Nation, right? How good is that? One Nation, etc., etc." And then you've got 21% for Labor. And 19%, if I remember the numbers correctly, I might have got it wrong.
Sure.
For Liberal, right? And they're saying, Labor's still ahead of Liberal, but look, everyone's going to One Nation. 27 plus 19 is 46.
Not enough.
Hold on. Liberal plus One Nation is 46 on a primary. Abbott got elected in a landslide at what, 44, 45?
Yeah.
The total vote on the Conservative side or the centre-right of Australian politics is almost half the damn country. Then you've got to take into consideration the people that are actually following your how to vote cards, that are voting shooters and fishers or libertarian or whatever. It's still well over 50%. And whilst, our system of government is slightly different to, the UK and whatever, the sentiment, the cultural sentiment in Australia is We just want to be left alone, right?
Yeah.
And the people that are voting One Nation, I don't actually think One Nation's vote will at the next election will look quite like that. Because when people get to the ballot box, they tend to change their mind, depending on,
Well, we don't know. That's why we're in a month. We want to see what happens as it manifests in the South Australian
Well,
election.
in Adelaide is going to
That'll
be
be
very, very interesting.
that'll be
because
real
One
if it
Nation
happens.
never really had a good showing in Adelaide. But people have got the shits. The Liberal Party of, God.
Can I just pick on something you just said there? You said it's if you add that to the Liberal vote, you get almost 46%, the One Nation vote plus Liberal. I saw some more polling and data on this where they actually did second preference. Unfortunately, it's going to take another election cycle because the Liberal voters, and this is what we try to address at Turning Point with our cards, they don't preference properly. So it ends up going 60 to 40 One Nation, maybe 35 One Nation. There's a very poor transfer. And so, and this is what I'm really proud to say, and I would have been great to bring Charlie. We were going to bring him out this year, and unfortunately couldn't happen. But
It won't now, no.
no. And so with regards to what Charlie addresses, it's getting out the vote because it's voluntary voting there. In Australia, it's preferencing the vote. That's what we try to address with, 2% of voters use our cards now, 1 in 50 people in this country. I couldn't even believe the stats. If we fix that, then we can help translate that, whichever party.
Well, you recall that dinner with Nigel Farage at, where was it? Down at the wharf there.
The wharf, yeah. We had the Sky News people. Abbott was there. Rowan was drinking too much.
He wasn't drinking. We were all drinking too much.
We had
what's his name? It was free wine. That's why.
Yeah, we had Trump's advisor.
Jason.
Not Jason Morrison.
Yeah, no, it was Jason. Yeah, Jason.
Oh, Jason Morrison.
It was
Miller.
Jason Miller.
Yeah.
He was.
Jason Morrison was the head of Seven. Yeah.
Jason Morrison is an Australian. But I think I said when I stood up and I talked about your cards, I said the most telling thing for me that came out of the early statistics back in 2022 was the amount of downloads in Adam Bandt's seat of Melbourne.
Wow.
And, I picked up on that. I'm not sure if you realize why I did at the time. It doesn't necessarily mean it was going to swap to Liberal or One Nation or whatever. But the fact that so many people in that electorate were downloading it, it might have even just been out of curiosity. The fact that it had such a high download said to me that they were just pissed with the Greens, right? They'd had enough of the establishment politics. They'd had enough of all this sort of stuff. And so when Bandt lost his seat, I wasn't at all surprised. And that, and I think so
is it the idea that the pendulum swings hard the other way when it
no,
goes
I
hard
don't
to
think
the Greens,
you can apply. I really don't think you can apply traditional political thinking to modern Australia. I think there's a lot of anomalies now. I think a lot of it's got to do with our national psychology that our traditional system doesn't necessarily take into consideration. I think there's how do I put this? It actually leads me to something else, which is that the right in this country, aside from the fact that they couldn't sell water to a dying millionaire, right, a millionaire dying of thirst, there's some serious issues with messaging. And I think that until they start tapping into how people actually think, you're not going to be able to... People don't think the way they used to. And the people that are on the centre-right side of politics in Australia still assume that because they don't actually... They've got blinkers on and all they do is focus on politics. They're not actually looking at the cultural issues and what's behind the cultural issues and the values and ideas that have eroded and everything else that I try and address. And as a result, they're confusing memory with meaning is the best way I can put it. And they're, you look at these March for Australia rallies and everything else, and they keep carrying on about Anglo-Celtic values and all this sort of stuff, mate. You guys just look like a museum tour, right? You're not actually telling people what they want to hear, right? And that is the number one rule of selling, right? You tell people what they want to hear, you can sell them anything. It really is very straightforward. I actually wrote a piece on this, which I didn't actually submit, called, just bear with me for a sec.
That's all right.
Called Stop Chasing Nostalgia.
Yeah, well, you said that to me on the way up after we got the coffee. You said, Joel, you don't get it. You just got the fumes of it. It was like you didn't even see it.
Yeah, and this is the problem. These marches are drawing thousands of people across the country who are clearly united in sort of a deep frustration as what mass immigration is doing to their daily lives, and housing's out of reach, and rents are soaring, grocery prices, et cetera, infrastructure buckling under the weight of demand. But what's happening is those genuine concerns that people are rocking up to these rallies for are being hijacked. And they're being hijacked by fringe groups and fuckwits, right? That are carrying on about things like Anglo-Celtic values and, all the sort of stuff that, yes, is very, very important. Yes, it's all part of our history and whatever. But nostalgia is not going to save this country, okay? You need to understand what Australia is, okay? What does a Ford Fairlane and a meat pie and a Lamington and a quarter-acre block have in common? They're simple. Australia was never about celebrating American excellence and capitalism and building empires and whatever. It was freedom through simplicity. It was liberation through an unburdened life. And the easiest way to summarize that, as I said, is people just want to be left alone. Australians don't want a lot, right? But when you keep carrying on about shit that doesn't actually matter to their everyday lives, they're not going to respond overly well, and your messages are going to get mixed, right?
And you turn them off.
And you lose them. And the problem is you need a fairly consistent message. Now,
which is what the media likes, really.
The media love the fact that the right can't get their shit together. They love it. They absolutely love it. Because if they actually did, and this is where Nigel is actually so bloody powerful, because he's one man with one message, and he's quintessentially British, right?
Yeah.
You've spent time with him.
Honestly, and I remember saying it to you when he begrudging, and I promise you guys, he begrudgingly got back into politics. He was going to move here at one point. He loved Australia. Had the Sky News
Australia
gig. Before GB News, he had the Sky News gig.
He was considering it. He kept saying, I think he wanted to spend more. I don't know about moving here because he's very, very British. He loves his hunting. He loves his, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But
fishing and all that.
Yeah, but he loves Australia.
But he gave 25 years of his life campaigning for Brexit. He thought, okay, that was my contribution to public life. I want him, and God bless him. Like, the guy's getting ready to wind down his life, retire, wants to make a bit of money. God bless his heart. I can promise you guys, and people say, oh, no, he just wants to be prime minister. I promise you, he did not want to go back into politics.
No, he didn't.
He did it. He's a man of duty, and there's not many people we meet a lot of amazing people with big followings and whatever. I've never been more impressed by a man than when I met Nigel. He's a real deal. Do you remember when we were getting ready for the Brisbane event in the town hall, and we were out at lunch? And I remember he had a little notepad, half the size of this, and he's like, "All right, old boy, tell me what's happening."
Yeah,
he wrote 7 dot points in about less than 5 minutes. Talked for about an hour, unprepared. Like, it was just amazing. It was he's the real deal.
He's just an average guy. I mean, we had dinner. He and I had dinner with 6 people. John Howard was present.
That looks formidable. You got to tell them the story. Sorry, man. This is the problem, guys, when you put us two on camera. There's so much to bring back that.
With the schnitzel.
Yeah.
I wasn't hungry. I really wasn't. And I even got Nigel got he sort of pulled me aside. He said, "Oh boy, you've got to eat that. It's rude." But we'd been eating for like 4 days straight because, as you know, on tour you eat a lot. You're always breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever, and you got to see as many people as you possibly can. And at this particular dinner, I happened to sit opposite John Howard, which was, I mean, I've met Mr. Howard a few times and whatever, but he's always interesting to have a chat to, and everybody knows he's got big eyebrows, but no, that's nothing.
No, it's nothing.
This is nothing.
It's more like my dad's ones. Like they're huge.
No, these are
the OG,
huge.
man. The OG.
These are huge, and each individual hair is the strand is very thick, right? And the fact is that when he does this with his face, they go up and down, and when you're in person, it's a bit more dramatic.
It's got a gravitational pull.
No, it's just incredible. And I wasn't overly hungry, and when they brought me the menu, they said, "What would you like to eat?" And I said, "Oh, look, whatever." I said, and I saw this. It's a cotoletta. I just assumed it would be like a small medallion of meat or something like that, crumbed.
Fancy
right?
restaurant. You're thinking it's going to be a bad portion size.
Yeah, no,
like
I'm
small
thinking,
portion.
mate, they brought this thing out, and it was a fucking brontosaurus steak like this, and they just plonked it in front of me. It was the size of the damn iPad, and Howard was leaning over, and the eyebrows went up like 4 inches, and he just went, "Oh, that's formidable." And I said, "Would you like some, Mr. Howard? I'm not going to eat it." He goes, No, I'm just going to watch with interest.
I worked with him before. And
Oh, you did?
yeah. And I think that's the same experience.
Yeah, no, he's a lovely guy. And, he's one of the few people other than Nigel, when he talks, you just shut up for hours and just listen to him speak.
Sorry for the detour. You were about to play Nigel a compliment about how he's a bit of a wordsmith, great with the British sort of suave.
Oh, no, I was going to say, we went to this dinner.
Yeah.
Like, when you talk about how he's just a normal guy, we went to this dinner and, we're with politicians and, every relatively important people and whatever, and he's acting all prim and proper. And we get back in the car and we're staying at the Star that night because we played, down the street. And we got back at about 11:30 and he said, "Nightcap, old boy." And I said, yeah, sure. Why not? I've been fucking drinking all day. Why not? And we ended up at the front bar, and there was this other pommy guy was there, and he goes, "What's Nigel Farage doing in Sydney then?" And mate, it was all on. Cigarettes came out. We were there for fucking 2.5 hours. I was dead. I was literally sleeping at the table, but he was just socializing with everybody, and he was holding court in the corner.
Had all the young'uns. We got all these
he
photos.
loves it. He loves it.
He went to the Sky News headquarters. He saw Piers Morgan.
Yeah.
A photo of Piers Morgan as well.
He's a funny guy, and there's a reason that he resonates with people.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we don't have a Nigel here. But at the same time, our system of government is very, very different, and it doesn't allow for the Farages of the world to actually break through. The preference voting and all that sort of stuff, Pauline can do as well as she likes, right? My guess is she'll probably get control of the Senate at the next election and she'll win 6 seats in the House. I can't imagine she's going to do any better than that.
Balance of power.
Sorry?
All the balance of power.
Yeah, well, that's what he means with the
Yeah,
Senate.
balance of power. She'll take control of the Senate.
What I was going to say on that, I just saw yesterday, Corey Bernardi and Pauline have come out and said, look, at every state and federally, we're going to be pushing for voluntary preferential voting. Now, I'm not sure if that's them trying to simulate.
They need to look. If
what's
you're going
on in the UK,
if you're going to get Australia to a point where it can actually, and this is where we're going to get to the sort of nuts and bolts of what I know your audience likes, which is the political side of things. There's certain things have to change.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're not going to change anything if you don't give the power back to the people. Because what this bloated blob that we call our bureaucracy, which is just ever growing, has actually done is ensured that they control everything, and that effectively we now have what I like to call end of line democracy or end of process democracy.
Bubble?
No, it's not a bubble. It's basically
like Rome, bro. It's like Rome.
It's basically where democracy, the whole point of democracy is there's 25 million, 26 million of us. We can't all get together and make decisions. So what we do is we get into groups of 100,000 people called electorates, and we elect one person to represent our group's interests, and we send them to Canberra, and that's their job. But they never do. right? They don't represent our interests. They do 3/10 of fuck all. The problem is that they don't actually know what the hell they're doing now, because the people that we're sending to Canberra aren't even a shadow of the ones that we used to send, a few decades ago.
Accountants, police officers, everything. It was a cross-section of Australia.
Yeah, now we just send lawyers and union officials.
Yeah, we send a cross-section of the sexual spectrum,
Well, with
Penny's Wong.
It's an awful lot of Wong numbers.
Yeah.
But, it's one of these things where we send these people to Canberra. They do whatever the hell they like for 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, we get to judge them. And if we don't like them, we throw them out. The problem is the way the system's actually set up is that we can only really pick from two parties. And they've done that intentionally, right? They passed a series of laws even at the end of 2024, which entrench them even more. So what we're seeing now with One Nation is definitely a massive protest vote. People have got the shits, and they think that whatever Pauline is saying is resonating with them, and it is. I know Pauline, she's a lovely lady, met her several times, including with Farage. And, even Christopher Pine said this to me privately one night. He said, I've met everybody in Canberra, and I would say that Pauline is probably one of the very, very few that is actually there because she genuinely believes what she's doing. Now, does that mean that she'll pass the Aussie political test, which everybody seems to think is, would I have a beer with this person? That's not how Aussies generally assess their politicians, especially when it comes to their leader. I've found in all my years, it's, would I send this person overseas to represent me? Which is why Turnbull was so popular early on.
Fair enough.
He looked like a leader. He spoke like a leader. He sounded like a leader.
To be clear, we don't like Turnbull, but he presented.
Look, I've met Malcolm several times. He's very charming. I don't necessarily like all his policies.
Supporting the voice, supporting climate change. All that.
But I mean, that's just him. He's a moderate, right? Now, at the end of the day, people voted for him because of the Rudd years. Yeah. They did. I mean, they voted for Abbott first. Obviously, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole again. But ultimately, they were happy to send Rudd. They were happy to send. Well, he looks like him, doesn't he? The Sky News thing. But they were happy to send Turnbull overseas to represent our interests because he looked like a statesman. He sounded like a leader. Yeah. Unfortunately for Pauline, many people don't think she does. Because she's got a quiver in her voice, and she doesn't necessarily look like a statesman. Now, that's not necessarily my opinion. That's just what I see. Now, what she is very good at, however, is telling people what they want to hear, because she believes it too. And I think the first port of call in this country is to get rid of this end-of-line democracy that we've got, where we don't actually have a say over anything that gets done in Canberra. They make up whatever law. I mean, these people get elected, and then they get to Canberra and they say, oh, we're going to propose this. It's like, when the fuck did you tell us you were going to do that? And then they do it and they pass it and off it goes. It's because they're not the ones making the decision. It's because the bureaucrats in the departments are the ones that are coming up with this nonsense, right? Yeah. So what we need, first things first, we need some people power. And citizen-initiated reform is the first thing that we need to get past in this country if anything is going to change and the people are actually going to determine its destiny.
You mean a referendum?
No, citizen-initiated reform. It exists all over the world. New Zealand has it. Even California has it, right? Effectively, what it is that you can either... There's three different things you can do. You can either propose things to get debated in Parliament with a certain number of signatures. You can get things put through in terms of laws or repealed if there's enough consensus, or you could actually call for a referendum, right? So the way a referendum works now is the government of the day decides that they're going to put something to a vote. They're going to spend $500 million. Whether we want it or not, they're going to spend $500 million on it. We don't even get to decide what the question is that gets asked. We just have to give them an answer. Well, I think we saw pretty clearly with The Voice, no one really wanted it in the first place. But we spent $500 million on it anyway.
Canberra did.
Right?
Canberra did.
Well, Canberra did. And that's the point, isn't it? 60% in Canberra said, yes, it's a really good idea.
70%.
70%. And 60% of the rest of the country said,
Washington votes 80% Democrat, 20% Republican. It's similar stats.
There you go.
It's
and
the
that's
same with London.
It's the same everywhere, right? So
the money's easy.
if Australia is going to have half a chance of actually changing, we need to put the power back in the hands of the people. You can only do that with citizen-initiated reform, which takes into consideration laws and also referendums.
Yep.
Once you've got that, then you can start doing things like I talked about, term limits.
Right.
If you can't change the party, we should be able to change the people.
Yep.
Right? So you can't have it both ways.
Right.
If you can't, I think we should have 12-year term limits for politicians. I've been saying this since I was, knee-high to a grasshopper.
Sure.
You got 4 terms in the House, you get 2 terms in the Senate, right? Adds up to 12 years. At the end of the day, because you get six in the Senate, 3 in the House, right? So you get 12 years. If you haven't been able to achieve what you want to achieve in any vocation, by the way, in 12 years, you're in the wrong fucking job.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
instead what we get, just so people have context, is Albanese, been there like 35, 40 years.
No, he's been there for 30. Yeah,
30
30
years.
years he's been there. And look, I actually said this in the book because it's a year old now, but if we actually had term limits at the 2025 election, 43% of the parliament would have been turfed because they've done their 12 years.
Really?
43%.
Gideon did that, didn't he? The stats, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I rang Gideon. I said,
Yeah,
mate, I need
right.
stats on this because it's doing my fucking head in. So he actually sat down and did the spreadsheet.
Crazy. It's amazing.
And so, and the interesting thing is at the next election, right, which is the one that's coming, another 30-odd% will go as well. They've done their 12 years. So we would have a completely new batch of faces, right, that aren't part of the furniture anymore. These people, they're not part of the swamp. They're fresh faces, fresh ideas and whatever. And what that does, and again, it's in the book, there's a whole litany of reasons why we should be doing it. But you're not going to get these kids that come straight out of university. They go to work for...
They're a senator, like 21 years old.
No, not just that. But what happens is they leave university. They go work for a particular member, right? They hang around the electorate office for 10 or 15 years. They stack out the branch, or when the member goes to resign, they put their arm around them, and then they're the new member for whatever.
Yeah.
Right? And they've got no life experience whatsoever. They're not actually bringing anything to the table. But if you've got and then what happens is they'll get elected and they'll stay there for 25, 35 years.
Yeah.
The problem is this. If you've only got 12 years out of a 40-year career, right? You've got 28 years. That's 14 either side of that you've got to do something with.
Yeah.
So if you're going to work, let's say you get a job at 25, you're going to retire at 65. Good luck with that in modern Australia, but let's say you're going to retire at 65. If you want to be a politician, it's probably going to be something you're going to do after you're established. It's not going to be a meal ticket. You're not going to become a professional politician. Yeah. We need less professional politicians that actually have some ideas, that have been in society, have actually worked, and know what needs to be done.
Like in my case, it would be like construction industry, been in it, worked my way up, have my own company. I'm getting close to 40, 45. I kind of know, okay, building's not working for this reason, this reason. I'm going to go into politics and run, go for 12 years, try and fix this and then get the F out.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, even Turnbull. Turnbull was a lawyer for Packer. He did Aussie Mail. The guy had a stellar career in business, which is why people said, okay, well, he did really, really well. He's probably going to be a good politician, right? Well, okay, the proof's in the pudding there. But, at the end, I mean, I think Turnbull was a good politician. I just don't think a lot of people agreed with his policies. But at the end of the day, he still had a good career.
Yeah.
And even Latham said this to me when he was in Parliament. You had train drivers and that sort of stuff that represented the labour movement. They were people that represented the working class. They knew what working class people went through.
Yeah.
Now you got Tony Burke and Mark Butler. I was like,
can I push back? Not because I disagree, but because I've got the statesman in my ear right now, just sort of saying, okay, but
what statesman?
I'd imagine this is the sort of thing old liberal statesmen would say as a rebuttal. They'd say, but Damien, when they get in, they don't know what they're doing. It takes a few years to adjust. The first term, you need to have that experience from the previous years to get things done in the future. A wealth of experience really helps. What would you say to those people that might
how much time do you need? What do you need to learn exactly? Parliamentary process?
Well, it's funny because we kind of said two things in this podcast. We've said that the deep state, the bureaucrats that are there, and sort of the permanent state, they kind of control too much. Maybe some of these statesmen might say, well, maybe you need the experience to understand maybe how to better deal with them. or how to work with them or whatever. I mean, is there an argument there or
No.
no? Right.
Because if you're in charge of a department, you really should. The buck stops with the minister. The minister should be the one that's calling the shots in that department. The problem is these people have got no life experience for the most part. They've got no idea what the fuck they're doing, and the department walks all over him. They just give the minister what he needs to do. He reads it, and that's the end of it.
Is that another thing you'd recommend? The greater ability for the parliament to hire and fire bureaucrats, and also call on the expertise of others?
This is another thing that we need to do, and the political class will never, ever do this unless it's thrust on them by the people. We need like an internal affairs for our government. Trump tried to do it with Doge, but it was very Trumpian, right? And like a lot of the things that buffoon actually does, it didn't work. What we need is, I've nicknamed it the Department of Pie, because everybody in Australia loves a pie. Public integrity and efficiency, right? It would be a separate department whose job is to watch over the bureaucracy for public integrity, in other words, corruption, and efficiency, and make sure that websites don't go from 4 million to 96 million, right? Now, people would say, okay, well, that's the department's job to look after that, but the department is the one that let it happen, right? Now, government efficiency is something that you can't leave to the individual departments to do, and you can't leave it to, because individuals at the end of the day are, they're just simply incapable, and they will protect each other as well. That's just how institutions work, whether it's government, whether it's private sector. But if you had someone like Mike Newman heading up and answerable to Prime Minister and Cabinet, heading up a department that their job was simply public integrity and efficiency, he would deal with it. This guy knows his shit.
Well, before I get onto that, do you mind if I quickly play that short video of John Anderson with Mike?
Yeah, please, by all means, yeah.
Here you go, guys. Just bring up the screen, Rami.
Australia now is ranked number 1 in terms of bureaucrats per head of population.
Number 1 in the world.
Number 1 in the world. The Federal Public Service has expanded by 135,000 people to 385. That's a 54% increase in the number of bureaucrats at the federal level. And since we have a reverse democracy now, where unelected bureaucrats are running the show, and ministers are invariably just conduits to push through the legislation.
Let's be really frank about something. Overwhelmingly, public servants vote Labor and Green. Overwhelmingly. They're not reflective of the broader Australian community.
We could talk about the ABC as a perfect example of an organisation which is supposed to, by its charter, show no bias whatsoever. But we could cite multiple examples of where that's not been the case. I always argue that if the ABC is so confident in the quality of its product, that it should be more than willing to go to a subscription model.
You've had a lifetime working with public servants, and we've agreed that we need them, and the best of them are brilliant, but it's gone awry, largely for political reasons. Let's be really honest about this. How do you fix it?
So, again, if you want to watch that, guys, that's Mike Newman and John Anderson.
There's actually another clip that's even better. Again, it's phenomenal. He actually goes into a number of other things. I'll send it to you. You can bring it up again for the podcast.
Yeah. Was it one of the clips from John Anderson's?
I actually dropped it on one of our groups.
Okay. Yeah, chances are one of our groups. There's so many. Isn't that the problem? There's too many damn chats.
And there's all these different apps because we keep getting thrown off.
Honestly, if I can just say, one of the was one of these. There's one which is cost blowouts. That was Jacinda Allen. There's the 24 times over budget one, and then there's the tax paid propaganda one. I don't know if it's one of those, or was it like a short video? One of these. One of the worst things I've seen with regards to just being a fly on the wall in your discussions is watching people listen to you, ask for your advice, court you, and whatever, and then they adopt 5% of your idea rather than the whole thing.
Yeah. They cherry pick. It's very frustrating when we're doing it.
But then they also ruin it as well, because sometimes there are some things you can't redo.
You're talking about comms campaigns that we've done. All sorts of
There's been a lot.
Representing people's interests in terms of communications is often very, very difficult. The problem is when you come up with a campaign or whatever it might be, there's a lot of moving parts, and it all needs to work together, like cogs in a machine. And what happens is these wannabe politicians, in many cases, they basically just they cherry pick the ideas that they like. They take the cogs out of the machine that they like, and then they run with it. Yeah. And then the whole thing goes to shit, and they come back and they go, "Oh, it just didn't work, did it?" It's like, well, fuck. It's like, I told you from day one, you've got to do it all or nothing.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. But, I just think that there's a number of things that, you talk about before, the pushback on, term limits for politicians.
Mm.
If we didn't have first past the post voting, and we could actually, and the voting system wasn't set up to favor the two major parties, you probably wouldn't need it, because we'd be turfing out elected members every time they screwed up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. But the way it's set up now, the votes filter up until they get to Liberal or Labor.
Yeah.
And that's the end of it. Right. So if they want to keep that system and they want to have a two-party system, fine. Term limits. If you don't want to have a two-party system, get rid of preferential voting.
Yeah. One of the,
It's that simple.
you know what the problem is?
We've only got one.
No, the stats on this. So with this is why we do so much with the Turning Point projects with the preference voting. It's such the left are really good at it. With the Greens, there's a 90 to 95% transfer rate when they get eliminated to
Dude, there's
Labor.
only two choices on that side of politics. It's basically because you got two buckets. It's Greens or Labor.
I agree.
On the right side of politics, the right can't organise themselves.
So in New South Wales, what One Nation I mentioned earlier is pushing for is voluntary preferential voting. For the benefit of the audience, when you do a federal election, you have to number all your numbers, or it's an invalid vote. You've got to number all the boxes in order, no repeats, no nothing. In New South Wales, we're the only state that has voluntary preferential, where you could just do one and then that's it, or you can preference as many and then stop wherever you want, and it's a valid vote. Now, One Nation's campaigning for that to be around the country. Now, what I'm worried about, and I need more data and knowledge, and I need to talk to some I don't know, McQuindle or someone about this, is in New South Wales' election with Mark Latham, when he ran, they didn't preference anyone as well. And the transfer rate, 65% of the One Nation voters only voted one for One Nation, and they didn't flow the votes to any other similar parties. My worry, and they got nothing. And that's what my worry is. I don't know, like we're in uncharted territory, much like the UK. It's kind of like we're not going to be able to predict these 3-horse races anymore.
Look, it's all shit. It's too complicated, and as I said, they've engineered it so that it protects their little fiefdom. My particular view is that it has its merits, but if we're going to do that, then being a politician, the reason they call them honourable is because they never actually got paid in many times.
That's right.
In early days,
Yeah.
It was an honour to serve. It is not a lifelong vocation. It is meant to be, I'm going to do the ultimate in public service. I'm going to become an elected member of parliament, and I'm going to do my bit for the country. You don't need to be there for 30 years to do that, right? I think 12 years is plenty. Fresh faces, fresh ideas. It's very, very important. And the way, the system worked in pre-internet days when technology wasn't advancing mankind as fast as it is now. Our system is no longer fit for purpose, right? And I just think that, and I'm happy to have this discussion. I've outlined my ideas in my book. My particular view is that term limits will actually go a long way to fixing not just politics at a parliamentary level, but the people that we elect might actually go some way to dealing with the bloated bureaucracy, because they may actually bring things like the Department of Pie to the table and say, look, this is something that we need to do, right? And, I wrote that policy. I wrote that policy ages ago. I wrote a policy, I talk about it in the book, where, there was an issue, and I wrote it at a state level as well, when I was working for Izzy in 2010. they were talking about we're losing a lot of skilled workers to retirement, whatever, people are being forced into retirement, et cetera, et cetera. Now, One Nation put this up at the last election. They didn't actually really spruik it as much as I thought they would, because I thought it was a really good idea. I wrote this back in 2010. Effectively, I said, why not let pensioners can earn like $50 a week and it doesn't affect their pension, right? Pensioners are living below the poverty line. The pension is fucked. I said, why don't you let pensioners work 3 days a week, right? Gets them out of the house. Mental health is going to improve. Most guys don't want to stay home with their wife, right? For a variety of reasons. Let them go out, let them earn a little bit of money, tax them on it, right? But it doesn't affect their pension. It's only going to be 3 days a week, and they can mentor younger trades and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. And you know what they're going to do with their money? They're going to spend it. They're going to go to pubs, RSL clubs, whatever. They're going to buy dinners. Yep. It's going to actually inject some life into the economy as well, and improve mental health outcomes for seniors, as I said, and all this other stuff, right? When I took that to a senior Liberal politician, again, no names, you know what he said? Well, the oldies are going to vote for us anyway, so why would we bother?
Wow.
It tells you everything you need.
Now, this is the problem. All they're interested in doing is being re-elected.
Yeah.
But if you've got a limit of 12 years, that mindset eventually will change, right? It'll probably change straight away.
Yeah.
That is where my thinking for term limits comes from.
Sure.
When I saw that, I was like, so hold on, why did you get elected? Are you elected just to keep getting re-elected, or you actually want to do something good for the country? He didn't actually shit on the proposal. He thought it was quite good.
Right.
Because that actually makes a lot of sense. I like it. But, no, they're going to vote for us anyway.
Are they trying to just win your constituents for this or that? Or...
At which point, that was when I dropped out of politics. I thought, you know what? I'm actually here to make a difference. I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, believe me. I mean, I've got a lot of flaws, as you well know. But I just thought, you know what? I'm wasting my time with these people.
Well, to close this book off, and I have one more question after that. One of the things I really respect is, I don't know how to put this. It's not that you stick in your lane, but this is a thesis. This is very well backed by studies in the back. And you're putting it out there to really start a discussion that's not happening, in my view. And I appreciate what you've done, because it's just like, read this and then let's have a chat. And you've put some ideas forward, all of which I think have merit, and I would love to see go ahead. But I love that it adds a lot more credibility to what you're saying by saying, I don't have all the answers on solutions, but this is what happened to the lucky country. This is exactly what the F is.
Oh, yeah.
I
I never wrote it to put forward a solution, because I don't have a solution. I've got ideas, but I don't know if they're going to work. I wrote the book to try and work out what happened, not how to fix it.
Yeah.
I think giving power back to the people, let the market work it out. I'm a big Milton Friedman fan. The market will sort itself out. And I think that if you just let the people have a little bit of power back, because voting every 3 years is clearly doing fuck all. I just think that I think Australia will sort itself out very, very quickly. It's a real shame that we've come to this point, because, as I say, your age group, and I respect a lot of you guys and what you do, and as I say, you're doing God's work, but you're pining for a past that you didn't even live in many ways. I think I grew up in the golden era of Australia, the 80s and all that, even though I'm not that old. But I saw the 80s, I saw the 90s, and I saw the 2000s. And it's not about... It's how do I put this? Pining for institutions and being nostalgic, right, is not... We're never going to get those institutions back, but that doesn't mean that we can't be as great or as free as we once were, right? And so what the book tries to do is say, look, we are never going to be like we were in the 80s. And you know what? Frankly, we don't want to be. Fax machines were a fuck-up. They really were. The paper went brown, and it was just... we've got a lot to be thankful for now.
Sure.
But you've got to look at what made those times great. You know what I mean?
And that's what you're saying. It's freedom through simplicity.
Freedom through simplicity. It was liberation through an unburdened life. And, I talk about this, in terms of, as an example, and I talked about Anglo-Celtic values earlier. Why did, and this is just an aside, but why did the Greeks and the Italians fit in so well in Australia?
That's where I was going. Yeah.
Right? We talk about Anglo-Celtic values, but were they really Anglo-Celtic? I mean, these were forged in ancient Greece. They were refined in Rome. They were filtered through Christianity, revived in the Enlightenment, and then they found their way into British institutions. Things that we talk about, things like the rule of law, liberty, civic equality, these things go right back to Athens as much as they do Westminster. The reason that the Greeks and the Italians and the Europeans fit in so well in Australia is because we all had the same values. We may have spoken different languages, we may have eaten different food, but we all had the same values. We all thought the same way. That is why that sort of migration actually worked. Yeah. Now, the problem is, if you keep talking about Anglo-Celtic values as, for example, values which I hold very dear to me, by the way, even as a Greek, because they're very similar to the way, the Greeks think. Yeah. It's politically self-defeating. You cannot build a broad conservative movement while telling half the nation it doesn't belong. Right? Half this country is either born overseas or has a parent who was born overseas. You and I are very similar to that. Now, on that basis, my family's been here for 80 years and 5 generations. At what point do we count as Australian in that thinking, right? Now, if you keep going down that road, all the people that agree with you are going to get the shits. They're going to get offended. So you can't actually do that. So, what I'm saying is, and look, even in America, for all its flaws, this is actually something that they get right. In the United States, they came from Anglo-Celtic stock too, but you won't hear conservative Americans demanding the return of English values when things go awry. They talk about American values, right? It's like in Australia, when someone does something that we don't like, we don't say, oh, that's un-Anglo-Celtic. We say, that's un-Australian, right? It's a very straight... Fuck, there's a lamb ad that's, that's un-Australian, Sam Kakovich, eat lamb. That's all about Australia. So anyone who embraces in America the principles of liberty, independence, and self-government, who honours the country, respects its laws, is counted as American, right? We don't do that in Australia, right? And the right has got to, if conservatives in Australia can't make the same leap, if they cannot stop confusing ancestry with principle, right, then they will condemn themselves to irrelevance. The future in this country will not belong to those peddling nostalgia. It will belong to those who can articulate a creed called Australian values and open them to anyone willing to live by them, right? That is what the right needs to get. If they're going to advance their cause in this country, with the demographics that we actually have, the number of immigrants and whatever, then you need to rethink your sales strategy, because right now, for the most part, the pitch is failing, right? And for the small percentage that keep carrying on like fuckwits, right, it's not working at all. And this is the problem.
And that's what that American businessman said to you. Damien, you'd make a great American...
He wasn't a business, he was a politician. He was a former governor.
He said,
right?
Damien, you'd make a great American. And doesn't that just...
He said to me, when I want to run again, I'll get you over here to run my campaign. I said, fuck that, I'm not doing that. But the thing is, look, it's, the problem is this, Australia never had, as I said at the beginning of the show, it never had a clarifying moment of revolution. We weren't born in blood. We inherited our institutions rather than forging them in struggle. And we were never forced to chisel our values into stone. And in the absence of a creed, we leaned on character. And for a long time, that was enough. Our stoicism, which I talk about in the book, our larrikin irreverence, the practical egalitarianism, I'll get that out, and a work ethic that prized reward for effort, that she'll be right, which was our Hakuna Matata, as you put it that time when we had coffee.
Yeah, that's right.
She'll be right was more than a shrug. It was a philosophy of proportion, resilience, and perspective. And, we need to get, I always say when Steve Jobs came back to Apple in 1997, I've trained a lot of people, and a lot of people have said to me in the past, I need to do a marketing degree. And I say, you know what? You don't need to do a marketing degree. Watch this YouTube video, right, of Steve Jobs. It's a 7-minute video. And you know what? Put it in the comments for your audience to watch. Oh, yeah. It's when he actually came back to Apple. They were 6 weeks away from going bankrupt, and he's talking to his marketing team about how they're going to get the brand back in the marketplace and actually revitalize it, because, even a good brand needs nurturing if it's going to retain its relevance and its vitality. And he got back to the why, the very essence of what made Apple a great company, right? And he launched that campaign called Think Different, where basically he had a montage of, Gandhi and Einstein and Muhammad Ali and, all these other people. And basically the theme of the campaign was, because people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. And ultimately they will use Apple computers, right? That's the whole point. But we need to get back to Australia and what made this country so great in the first place. Stop pining for Crocodile Dundee and everything else. Look at what he represented. Our larrikin irreverence, it was, as I say, freedom through simplicity, right? The minute you get back to that and you can start campaigning on those messages, landslide, right? But they don't listen.
And with I told you what I thought about that, but the "she'll be right" saying goes back to the rats for Tobruk. That's a stoic statement. It was by farmers that were out there, that were used to working on the farms.
Oh, really?
And they were out. Yeah,
it was forged in the harsh realities of this land, where you had floods one day and droughts the next. And you had to be stoic.
Exactly. It's a rough country. And the idea of "she'll be right" wasn't sweep it under the rug, she'll be right.
It was a coping mechanism.
It was a coping mechanism. Let's just get on with it. Let's just give the desert fox Rommel a run for his money. And he said, if I was to take hell, I'd use the Aussies to take it and the New Zealanders to hold it, something along those lines.
Yeah.
We're not sure if he actually said that, but we like to think he did. But the point is, there is stoicism laced through that. Stoicism meaning Greek philosophy going back thousands of years,
which as I say, found its way into
exactly. And so it's not this Anglo look, and obviously,
I think it doesn't came from Cyprus, right?
I don't know where it came from, mate. Look, what I can tell you, there's so many different versions of all this. What I can tell you is this, okay? Nostalgia cannot save a nation. Principles, however, can. And if Australia is going to succeed in the 21st century, we need to stop chasing the shadows of yesterday and start identifying clearly and unapologetically the values that made us strong in the first place, right? It's that straightforward. What values? Freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Reward for effort. I listened to the national anthem. Yeah. Right? Australians all let us rejoice, for we are young and free, or one and free. We're neither, frankly, right?
Yeah.
We've golden soil, yes, and wealth for toil. In other words, if you work hard, you'll make money. No, you won't. Not anymore, right? You get taxed into poverty. Our land is girt by sea. That's probably one of the only truths in that opening line. Well, the country was founded on certain principles. America was founded on certain principles, right? Those principles is what carries through in America, as I said.
Yeah.
Not their...
Yeah, it's a free country. You can say what you want, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's chiseled into stone, and it adapts depending on, where you are. And ultimately, like, how do I put this? The future will not belong to those peddling nostalgia. It will belong to those who can articulate a creed called Australian values, open to anyone willing to live by them. Now, I'm not suggesting that, anyone who just walks into the country, that says, "Oh, I'm willing to be an Australian," gets let in. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying, however, is that if you go out and you campaign on this basis, the people that genuinely believe it will support you, and the ones that don't won't. And that way you'll be able to weed out, the men from the boys, the notes from the noise, all that sort of stuff. So
you made the point about, and we see these patterns, don't we? That's why the Greeks integrated so well. That's why the Italians integrated so well.
They believe the same stuff.
I recently, because I've been trying to work this out in my own mind, why are the Middle East Christians that have come here in the 60s and before, why did they sort of flourish here, do so well here, and integrate so well and become sort of part of the community, intermarry and whatever? I didn't understand it when my dad used to say, "You're Greek Orthodox." I said, "What are you talking about? We're 100% from the Levant region. We're Syrian and we're Lebanese. What are you talking about?" It's because when Alexander the Great conquered the whole of, the known world at the time, he basically paved the way for Christianity to spread through the language of Greek. And the Christians in the Middle East, they held on to that Greek philosophy, language, and they carried it through. And I was like, is that why it's like that?
Well, the Greek
But
philosophy,
it fertilized it. So those people, especially the Christians specifically, if you understand the history of how the Arabs spread and Islam through conquest and whatever, that's why the Christians especially integrated so well when they came to Australia. I didn't understand it until I was
the
looking at-
Anglo-Celtic values that these people talk about, which I said earlier, were forged in ancient Greece. It's all the same stuff, and it was actually filtered through Christianity, and everywhere where Christianity went, right? This is one of the reasons that any religion, and I'm not going to single any out, but any religion that has a creed that the people that follow that particular religion are God's chosen people, regardless of who it might be. There's a million religions that do that. That is not compatible with Western values and specifically Australian values. We don't think like that. And when people that come to live here think that way, that they're better than us simply because of the God they choose to believe in, well,
or their ethnicity as well.
Or their ethnicity, yeah. I mean, this is a problem. Australia is a very, very beautiful, unique country, and we need to be very careful with that sort of thing. That's a discussion for another day. The biggest problem that we have is that, as you know, talking about it makes you a racist or it makes you a bigot or whatever it might be. I couldn't care less what they call me. That it is what it is. I'm neither, frankly. But it's a discussion that needs to be had. It's one that was had. And the worst thing about the tolerant left is the fact that they began to tolerate the intolerant. And that has put us in a position now where someone needs to come along and reverse it. And it's going to be a very, very unpopular thing from, the political class, the media class, etc. They're not going to like it. But the only way we're actually going to sort this country out is to have some very uncomfortable conversations. Not necessarily uncomfortable for people like you and I, but,
as a society, we kind of didn't talk politics at the table, I guess, and we put it off for too long.
Look, the problem is, you've got values and ideas that go downstream into culture, which goes downstream into politics. So politics is determined by the culture of the country. That's the whole thing about, politics is downstream from culture. What's happened now is the government has got so much power. It's got its metaphoric foot on our throat, and culture evolves from values and ideas, which are effectively things that are discussed, argued out amongst people, amongst society, and ultimately, find their way into, a nation's sort of, it's culture. Yeah. I think the problem is now the government is controlling our culture. We're not allowed to say this. We're not allowed to say that. And, if you do say it, you could face jail time.
Yeah.
The problem is now is that culture is downstream from politics. And that is a very dangerous place to be.
And I guess that's where it comes from, the social engineering thing. And that's why I have these hats that make Australia great again. They are demonizing all the values that made Australia great in the first place. Christianity, a fair go, if you're going to apply yourself, then you get a reward for it from your labor. You got to keep what you work for. You get out what you put in. Equality before the law. And that's what I think, we've lost, and that's why I like that phrase, make Australia great again. But Damien, that's just to close off the book. It would be remiss of me. I hate to finish on this point. I probably should have started with this. But a lot of people might be listening to this, and a lot of the moralists and purists out there, and I won't name the ones, but I know we're thinking the same guy. What would you say to the people that are like, Joel, why do you have this penthouse guy on? And I know what I'd tell them with regards to it. Coming from a Catholic background, Why did you, once you left politics in South Australia, why did you go into print media and the Penthouse brand specifically?
Well, I mean, I became known for Penthouse. It wasn't the only bloody thing that we did. I think it was because I was kind of thrust into the spotlight. I mean, I don't seek publicity, as you very well know. I've never posted on social media. I don't like doing it.
Yeah.
I'm on it, but just to get my news and stuff. But I was kind of thrust into it because of the Milo Yiannopoulos tour, which was a publicity stunt. Because we turned the magazine around. When I took over Penthouse, it was losing $1 million a year. And in 3 years, I'd turned it around, and I wanted to tell this story. And I thought the media might actually, want to say, well done, congratulations. It's not easy to do, especially in print media today. And by the way, in a category that is getting completely decimated. And obviously, my first order of business when I took over Penthouse was to take the porn out of the magazine.
Yeah, which is an important point.
Well, it is an important point. No one actually knows that I did that. Well, the
Yeah.
people that used to subscribe to it know. I mean, we still had some very, very tasteful erotica in it, but it wasn't any that sort of gynecological exploration that it used to be.
Yeah.
And if you saw the magazine the way I inherited it and where it ended up, it was phenomenal. It was a completely different magazine. It was more like black and white. And the Milo Yiannopoulos tour, I thought to myself, if these people aren't going to talk about me, I'll make them talk about me. And, I thought to myself, he was really the first bona fide culture warrior of his time 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what, fuck it, I'll just bring him out here.
Yeah.
And that'll light a media shitstorm,
Yeah.
which it did. And, the rest is history.
But also, to be clear, and this is where I get really annoyed with people that, have said, Joel, why are you associating with this guy and whatever? And I'm like, well, when was the last church that gave me an opportunity? When was the last this or that? They always say, oh, we want young people to come up. But this is the guy that's not only giving me opportunities that, are aligned with what I want to do, which is, my more Christian sort of, line of talking on camera and whatever. But when there were fights, significant fights, like with Pell, Penthouse was
At the forefront.
the only.
It would be probably one of the only. If I mean, I know that Andrew Bolt was quite vocal on it in his print media capacity. I think in the Herald. Was it was it Melbourne?
It was on Sky News and
Sky News as well. But I forget he was. But as far as print goes, Penthouse is probably the only publication that defended Cardinal Pell.
Yeah, and it's because you had that libertarian streak, that speaking truth to power, giving it to the man. That's
it wasn't. I mean, look, the Catholic Church and Penthouse have never really been friends. Let's be
Sure.
frank.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Was
the
Catholic priests don't like.
No. but you were loyal to your values.
Well, my values were
the guardians of the democracy.
They found him guilty. That judgment,
Yeah.
and in fact, Charles Waterstreet, who he's another sort of persona non grata. I love Charles. He and I get very good friends. But he helped me write that, and with Gideon as well. Those two sort of worked that out together. But this man was found guilty because of a crime that. It wasn't found. They didn't find him guilty because of the crime that they accused him of. They found him guilty because he protected pedophiles in the church. Now hold on a second. He may well have done that. I don't know if he did or he didn't. And if he did do that, put him on trial for that, right? But the trial, what you've got him on trial for, he didn't do. Now 7 judges in the High Court found him innocent. That was a 7-0 decision. Okay, so clearly there was something wrong with what happened in the Victorian full court of the Supreme Court or whatever it was, the appeals court, and etc. Penthouse, look, I am a man of principle. I like to think I am anyway. As Groucho Marx said, these are my principles, and if you don't like them, I have others. But Pell was one thing, and COVID was another, and freedom, and specifically freedom of speech, is the cornerstone of Western civilization. And frankly, I don't give a fuck what people say about me and my magazine.
Absolutely.
You know what?
Just for people that don't know, because and that's the thing, they look at like, Joel, if I associating with this person and that. But I personally, first off, don't care. But there's actually a good reason, and it's about integrity.
Well, you know what? Nigel Farage, is actually quite funny. I'll tell you a quick story about this. He, when I first brought him out in 2018, I didn't do it as a Penthouse campaign. And it was just that sort of, Nigel Farage is coming to Australia, etc. And he, I didn't actually speak to him until he landed in Perth from London at that point. And that was the first time I'd met him. In the meantime, we'd been dealing with his agent. and they picked up on the fact that the website, my idiot IT guy, registered the website in the same company that owned the publishing business, which owned Penthouse, right? And so obviously the British media decided to do a bit of a deep dive, and they found that, you know, I was behind it, and they're like, you know, Farage is associating with a pornographer, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, Farage got here, and I'm like, oh, look, you know, Mr. Farage, I'm really sorry about it. The first thing I said to him, I said, I'm really, really sorry about that. And I remember he was lighting up a smoke at the time, as he does. And I said, you know, this, and that. And he goes, I don't give a fuck. He goes, I don't care. Exactly like that. I went, really? He goes, I couldn't give a rat's ass, mate. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. He said, you know, he goes, I've seen your magazine and I've seen what you write. He goes, and I think it's one of the best, some of the best writing I've ever had, actually.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
and so I thought to myself, you know what? Because I was a bit worried at the time. I thought, you know, he's going to get here. He's not going to like me.
And you appreciate brand control and associate. Like, you got to handle the talent.
You got to handle. Well, you got to handle the.
They're in your
press and-
trust, and it was a slip, and
Yeah.
and that's his character.
Yeah, he's and this is
like-
the sort of thing, you know, like he's smart enough to see past all that. And you know, I remember we were in the car and in the 22 tour, it was me. We're in the back of a cab, and we were leaving Bondi. We went to Ravisi's, and we just kept downing fucking gin and tonic. That was quite funny.
Don't try and outdrink that guy. All
no,
right,
don't try and
tried. I heeded your advice. I
get in the plane with him. The first time he came down, we were both in business class. We happened to be seated next to each other because they put his agent somewhere else. And you know, the stewardess comes along and she goes, "It's 10 o'clock in the morning." She goes, "Can I get you gentlemen a drink?" And I'm ready to order a coffee. And he goes, "Yes, double gin and tonic. You have one too, old boy. Little heart starter." I'm like, "It's fucking 10 o'clock." Mate. You know, he goes, "That's all right. It's 5 o'clock somewhere." You know,
and you feel obligated to.
Oh, well, I was very.
Well, I'm not going to let this old man like.
No, so he's not going to lick me, but no, trust me, he did. We were leaving Ravisi's, and we were smashed. And when I weren't smashed, I mean, we had a few drinks, and I said, "Look at this fucking," because we were comparing press that we were getting at the time for his tour.
Yeah.
And I was saying to him, "Look at this. Look what they've written about me here, right?" And his PR guy is sitting next to me, and he's bringing up all these historical ones about Nigel joining the Mile High Club and whatever. Nigel is pissing himself. He goes, "Let him write it. Don't worry about it." He said, "It doesn't matter what they're saying about you, right? There's no such thing as bad publicity unless they're calling you a pedophile. You can't get away from that, right? Even if it's not true and they suggest it, that's it. You're stained with it." So you know, but he loved it. He thought it was hilarious. But he was very complimentary of Penthouse. And ever since then, I thought, you know what? I don't give a fuck what these people say about me. I know what I did. We turned the magazine around. It was phenomenal. And it was so good. We ended up taking over US Penthouse as well, you know, which was a huge honor to drive the editorial content for that as well. Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, once COVID hit, and after that,
oh, look, I didn't renew the license.
But you had a good run.
Oh, 10 years. Yeah, no, we were doing very well. It was a real shame, too.
But again, the lockdowns didn't exactly help the business.
No. We
and
everyone stopped.
Yeah,
we couldn't sell magazines. No one was going online. I mean, they were going online, but the sort of stuff that we were selling wasn't. It wasn't. COVID hit our business as hard as it hit everybody else's. But I mean, at the end of the day, you know, the license was going to come up for renewal at the end of 2022. I'd had enough. I'd had a son, and the party lifestyle as well, which was was part of it. I'd had enough of. And look, I lived every young man's dream. You know, and I did it for 10 years. Not many people can say that they did. I had my time. No one can take that away from me. But, you know, it is what it is. And, you know, I do miss it. I'll be honest. I do. There's parts of it that I do miss.
Yeah, you are quite sentimental about it in the book. But one thing before we close off this podcast was it'd be remiss of me during that period with the Milo tour. Like, this was revolutionary in Australian history. The idea that we had conservatives coming out. You're kind of the reason why we have such a big problem with visas in this country with UFC fighters.
Like another one that's going to blame me for this shit.
Yeah, literally, yeah. But it's a compliment in a way, because what did you do? You did
we
2
pioneered
weeks, like 10 shows in 2 weeks or something crazy.
No, we did.
All sold out.
We did 3 shows in Melbourne that night. We did 2 shows in Sydney in 2 nights. We did. Yeah, it was a big tour.
Yeah. And the RoboCops in Melbourne. Got to tell that story.
300 of them. Yeah, I was posing with them. I've never seen anything quite. They were going to helicopter us out of the venue. That was how bad that was.
Now, this is the first time anyone saw these RoboCops out in force. And
Well, the riot police, because what happened was the Sudanese gangs descended on the they had a bit of a problem 10 years ago. I don't know if they still got them, but with
it's
these,
pretty bad. They're always doing sword fights in the shopping centers now.
yeah,
Actually bad.
yeah, this is the knives. Yeah, I've seen that with the $35 million bins that no one's using.
Oh yeah,
Machete.
The machetes, yeah.
$300,000 a bin or something. But
the-
but what about that time?
Go to King of Knives and buy a fucking kitchen knife. It's really not that hard.
Really.
But no, I think
When you got to tell the story about the cigars when you were enjoying watching the socialists get their heads cracked by the road.
yeah, well, it wasn't cigars; it was cigarettes. It was actually
Yes.
quite well, anything that we could get our hands on at the time. But yeah, well, to be fair to the left, they were actually quite peaceful.
Right.
And what happened was the police completely estimated the amount of protesters that were going to come out in terms of left-wing protesters against Milo at that time, and they sent in 300 riot cops which surrounded this venue, and we were locked in. Bloody hell, that was funny. Anyway, what happened was someone, I don't know how it happened, but there was housing trust that was a couple of blocks down,
Yeah.
and a lot of these gang members lived in these particular blocks,
Yeah.
and they came down. And they just started launching rocks and anything they could get their hands on at the venues. And so the police started obviously cracking heads with them. Then the socialists got involved because they thought, like, you can't bash these people. These are just, poor housing trust people. And so they started getting involved as well, and they started getting bashed. And
Yeah.
well, I was just sitting there with a drink and a cigarette going, this is fantastic. I actually, like, you cannot make this shit up. It was amazing.
Yeah. So you can also blame Damien for the riot cops having their first simulation.
Yeah, I'm probably to blame for
Sorry,
that as
Melvin.
well.
This is before COVID. The other thing is with the Milo tour, I was really gracious of you to gift me the shoe that was thrown at him.
Oh, yeah.
The Sydney event, which I was at, by the way. I was at that.
You were at that one?
And I was there at that, and I was also at the Nigel tour in 2018. I was actually made it onto TV for one of the things at the
Okay.
time. It's just funny how these. Yeah,
Look, I think the police have to get their priorities right. I mean, this is one of the things that shits me with what's going on, especially with this Bondi inquiry and that devastating Bondi terror attack. When Nigel came down in 2022, we were harassed by the New South Wales police. So we do our own intelligence organizing and everything else, and we know where there's going to be protests, and we have people that monitor online, and you can hire companies that do all this sort of thing for you. And there was absolutely no evidence whatsoever that there was going to be any protests in Sydney at the time, and that did not stop the police from harassing us to send police to the Nigel show and also pay for their presence. And they were so heavy-handed with it that the last day before the show, I got a phone call from a police officer, and she said, if you don't agree to pay us $30,000 and deploy our police officers, we are going to pull the venue's license and we are going to shut down the show.
Yeah.
I spoke to her superior and we agreed on 6 police officers. It cost me $3,500, I think.
Yeah.
And they ended up deploying 6 and then another dozen or so that just basically went there. They had nothing to do. They ate all the food in the backstage area in the green room, right?
I remember they just.
No, we catered for them as well.
We took care of it. It wasn't their fault.
No.
It wasn't the low-level cops' fault. It was a political thing.
It was a political thing. And Mark Latham, bless him, he actually did a Freedom of Information inquiry and found out what actually happened with that. Now, what kills me with Bondi is you've got heightened terror risk.
Yeah.
It's elevated at the moment.
Yeah.
Right? You've got this rise in anti-Semitism, apparently, which the media and the politicians keep talking about.
Yeah.
And you've got a Jewish festival in an area with maybe 150,000 festival goers. And you know how many police they deployed? 2.
Ooh.
How come they didn't harass them? Why didn't they actually... They're more interested in chasing people like me that have got no terror threats whatsoever. They didn't even know... The people didn't even know where we were going to be, because we announced the venue the night before. That's why no one knows.
Because you learned from the Milo tour.
We learned from the Milo
at least
tour.
24 hours before.
Yeah, and people are happy with that and they get it because we obviously don't want any problems. But this thing here...
Yeah.
How many people died as a result of that negligence?
Oh, you mean Bondi? Yeah. I mean, 15 people plus the gunman. I mean...
No one really counts the gunman. No one cares. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's just utter bullshit. Where are the priorities? You're interested in chasing right-wingers, right, and trying to get money out of us to, you know, secure us for something where there's no threat and where there's actually genuine threats, you know.
Well, that's where things are going. I mean, with the hate speech laws now, we've already had one guy thrown into prison just for mentioning, you know, criticizing Jewish people. Obviously, we all here disagree with that. But then to throw him in prison with amazing efficiency for 1 whole year, whilst we had a pedophile that's like in prison for like 3 to 6 months, I was like, are you serious? Like, we got to get our priorities straight. And you know, the other thing, Damien, they are basically pushing for more hate speech laws with regards to the LGBT community. They want to have an LGBT voice to the parliament. To this is just coming out now. So basically, that big story, it was another Islamic thing. There's young teens, the ones that were linked to the stabbing of Bishop Maramari 2 years ago. That same gang of guys, because that boy that stabbed him was in this sort of group. It just came out in the ABC 2 nights ago. They were luring gay younger men on these dating apps and then bashing them, making them recite Islamic sort of lines and whatever. And so when the ABC reported this, they said, these guys, they're linked to the alleged stabbing of an alleged terrorist attack against a bishop, not Bishop Marmari, the most famous bishop in the world, and an alleged attack 2 years ago, like they need more time. And on top of that, he tied it to he said, this also might be informed by far-right ideologies, manosphere ideologies, and so
you know what?
It's just
fuck that. This is ridiculous. Seriously, I mean, every minority group in history has seen free speech as their greatest ally because it is the means through which they argue against their oppression. Right. Brendan O'Neill said that to me. Ironically, I bumped into him at the Rusty Rabbit the other day. He happened to be here for the IPA, and we ended up having a chat, and he ended up back at my house, and we didn't drink. But it's so true. We've forgotten the basic principles that actually made our society, Western civilization, great. You cannot legislate your way to prosperity, right? It's like fucking for virginity. It doesn't work. You can't tax your way to prosperity. You can't legislate your way to freedom. Yeah. You can't fuck your way to virginity.
It's a strange analogy, but I understand.
You understand what I'm trying to say? It doesn't work. You're taking it backwards.
So no, but just to tie off that Nigel story, I mean, we were lucky because, and there are at the time, there were some good people in the mainstream media at the time, like Jason Morrison. Jason Morrison at the time, head of the, I don't know, remember his official position, but he was basically the head of the Channel 7. He was in the audience at our show.
Yeah, he was, yeah.
We broke the news on the stage.
Well, he went over to...
And this was the reporting.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, but if you bring it up my screen,
Politician Nigel Farage has claimed Sydney police threatened to shut down his speaking event last night unless he paid thousands of dollars for security. Over 1,000 people turned out to hear the Brexit Party leader at a sold-out event at Pyrmont. A large group of officers patrolled outside and they had been expecting some trouble.
As it was, we didn't get any protests at all. There were no difficulties. But the fundamental point is that for a meeting where Conservative views were expressed, a ransom had to be paid. And I would argue, if I'd been a representative of Black Lives Matter or the climate change movement, that wouldn't have happened.
Farage says he's travelled the world on speaking tours and never had a government organisation threaten to stop him.
Goodness knows who runs the police here, because the officers that turned up were utterly charming, very nice and good at their job. But think about this. You know, I came along to Australia as a visitor.
I love him.
This was a private venue, a ticketed private venue. We had our own security. Had there been a concern about violent protests, we'd have known about it. We'd have known about it, because there are always clues online about these things. As it was, basically a ransom was demanded for this event to go ahead. And the New South Wales Police asked for 3,000 Aussie dollars to be paid up. Otherwise, they'd stop the event from taking place. The money was paid yesterday. Even more extraordinarily today, at 2 o'clock, another email came through to say unless the contract was signed by 4 o'clock, they'd stop the event going ahead. Now, you know what? I think free speech should be free. And I think for the police force in Newcastle, I mean, look, I'm an outsider, but if this happened in my country, this would be a front page story on every national newspaper. There was nothing seditious or bad or wrong going on in that room tonight, just an exercise of free speech. And I don't think any money should have been paid for it to go ahead. If you don't pay the money, we close the event. And then today, if you don't sign the contract, by 4 o'clock, we'll stop the event from taking place. From what I can see of it, these weren't proper police officers. They were more like bureaucrats working within the police service. I want to re-emphasise the officers that turned up were charming and lovely and doing their job. And of course, in a city like this, there will
All right. So the other thing on this tour, and again, that was outrageous, and Mark Latham really did stand up for us going to the Parliament and inquiring, and he's a pit bull when it comes to that stuff. He's a real pit bull. The other thing we have to mention and go on record on is the visa with that. We needed Alan Jones himself to pick up the phone on Albo's private phone number or something like that 3 days before. We didn't have the actual...
Not only 3 days before, because Nigel was travelling from South America, having just done a speech, and he was flying into Sydney. Oh. He didn't get his visa until 24 hours before. If he didn't get it, he would have been stuck, because he would have had to go back to the UK, but he didn't have a plane ticket. He would have been stuck in South America. I forget where he was coming from, El Salvador or something like that. But yeah, they didn't approve it until 24 hours before he was going to fly.
And that's the thing, guys.
And they'd had it for weeks, by the way. It's not as if they'd just received the application. They'd had it for like 6 or 7 months.
And it's not as though he's no one. He's a member for the European Parliament representing our motherland, the motherland of Australia.
Mate, don't even get me started on this shit. But again, this is where you got the bureaucracy, you got in-group bias, all the stuff I talk about in the book. This is what we're up against. Yeah. Right. And it's not going to be easy to fix. It can be fixed, but it's not going to be easy.
And thanks to Alan lending a hand, because he was actually at the Sydney. She was going to be at the Sydney show, and there was a great.
Not only that, I needed him as an MC, and I jumped on him at the dinner. I said, "Alan, can you do me a favor and step in?" And it's typical Alan. It was like, well, I mean, if he wants me to, you can twist my arm. No, he was great. He was gracious, and that was a great discussion between Jones and Farage. I thought it was excellent.
I wish we recorded it. But no, and the idea that he had I think Albo's personal number was hilarious.
So he's got everybody's.
Like Albo.
Back then he had everybody's number. I'm not so sure about now, but
well, we definitely miss him on the scene.
Well, we lost a giant for common sense, not so much for the centre right cause, but I think Alan was as popular as he was because he just made sense, to mainstream Australians. He identified with them, he understood them. And they backed him and they rewarded him for it. And I hope he gets through what he's going through at the moment. It's not. I saw him actually recently. I went to his house, just to see how he was going. He's doing well, but I hope everything goes well for him.
Damien, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. It's one of my favorites, if not the most favorite conversation I've had on camera, because
sorry about all the swearing.
It's I kept the tally. I kept the tally. It ended up being like Joel 2, Damien 24. So
that's actually pretty.
It's actually all right.
I was doing all right. Yeah.
Like for a 2.5 hour discussion, that's actually pretty good. But I apologize if you've got kids and you're listening. I probably should have done a disclaimer at the start. I knew what we were getting into, but I know it was a good discussion because Rami didn't fall asleep, and in fact he was actively part of it. But Damien, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I think that I'm very eager to hear if you're listening, if you enjoyed this, if you'd like him to come back, leave it in the comments. Tell us what you really took that was valuable out of it. And if you really want to actually get a hold of the book, you can find it not only on the website in the description, but we are going to also try and do something especially special for this particular discussion. Where I will actually be for every we've just come out with these brand new hats, which are the Make Australia Lucky Again hats, which are designed exactly like the Make Australia Great Again hats, the same thread and the same quality and everything. And you guys have already bought 500 of those hats, so I'm glad you like them. But with every one of those hats, we will be throwing in for the Make Australia Lucky Again a copy of the book, complimentary. I think it's not about making money with this. It is literally we all need to read this. This is very important stuff. This will explain a lot of the, let's call it nostalgia, or the thing that we're trying to get grasp of that we've lost in this country. And it actually fills in the gaps with something a bit easier than just the daily news cycle, which I'm personally getting, frankly, sick of. It's all surface level stuff. And so if you want something deeper, this will speak to you in a way which will be life-changing. In a way, you can't unsee it. Once you see the patterns, once you read this book, it was the easiest read in the world. It only took me about maybe 5 hours on the way to the US. It was very straightforward. But Damien, yeah, look, I pray you do come back. I actually wouldn't mind you weighing in on some of the things, 'cause I think you've got some unique insights, even if it is some of the day-to-day stuff. But even to go back and talk about maybe the potential for a future book as well, which you almost tease you may or may not do.
This one almost killed me. I don't know about another one. But look, there's a lot to talk about. I mean, we only scratched the surface today, and I probably didn't do it any justice. People are going to be listening to the podcast and probably think this is just a fucking schmozzle. But it's not.
Yeah.
I can assure you, it's once you start reading it and you go through it and you see that because it's a timeline, and it's quite linear. I think people will, they'll see things the way I see it, and that could be good or bad, but maybe it'll go some way to helping.
And just lastly, and I mentioned the link with Turning Point USA and some of the chats you had some chats with Charlie. I was just curious what he was like for the benefit of the audience.
What you see on camera. Yeah, he was. I mean, I didn't speak to him for very long. Charlie was always very busy. But he was very polite. He was very courteous. He was certainly very keen to make a difference in Australia as well. He saw us as a sort of distant cousin. I couldn't say a bad word about the guy, frankly. He was certainly very direct. He made his point very clearly. But that he wasn't nasty about it. He was just busy. So he was a nice guy, and I hope his legacy lives on.
Amen. Amen to that. Guys, if you like the show, if you enjoyed this particular conversation, don't forget to give it a share. If you want Damien back, put in the comments. And if you want to get a hold of one of those MAGA hats, definitely click the link in the description for Make Australia Lucky Again and grab a book. I'll see you guys later. God bless you. Take care. And I'll see you next time.